Hello everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Monday, January 30th, and I hope you all are having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and in today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'm going to start off with our Techstrong News Recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then, we will head over to Allen, where he will sit down with Adam Gavish, co-founder and CEO of Do Control, to talk about the silver linings in malicious attacks, and quickly realizing the need to address both human and non-human entities effectively and comprehensively in order to maintain a healthy SaaS security posture. Allen will then talk to Aubrey Turner, executive advisor at Ping Identity, to talk about how to provide a frictionless online experience without sacrificing the security of personal information. We will then air an episode of the CD Pipeline. In this episode, hosts Alan Schimmel and Lori LaRusso are joined by Melissa McKay of JFrog, Fatih Digirmenci of the CD Foundation, Emil Backmark of Ericsson, and Dadisi Sanika of Apple, as they talk about the challenges CD faces, the CDF's work on overcoming them, and track the progress of the CDF Special Interest Group interoperability has made toward more open interfaces and better leveraging metadata. We will then go to Mike Rothman, where he meets with Danielle Cook, CMO of Fairwinds, to discuss Kubernetes in 2023 by highlighting findings from an upcoming Pulse meter and listing the critical success factors for K8s to mature in 2023. Then we go to AWS reInvent 2022, where Mitch met with Krishna Mohan, global head of the AWS business unit at Tata Consultancy Services, to talk about how Tata Consultancy Services is launching the TCS Quantum Computing Lab on AWS to help enterprises explore, develop, and test business solutions and accelerate the adoption of quantum computing. Then we will go to Bonnie, where she meets with Rick Van Zura, CEO of Freight Farms, to discuss the world's largest network of IoT-connected farms spanning 49 US states and 33 countries. Then, Alan Schimmel in an all-star panel including Ron Gula of Gula Tech Adventures, Thomas Crane of Insight Partners, Suman Natarajan of B Capital Group, and Julian Waits of Rapid7 discuss what the DevOps Everywhere mantra means to their investment strategies. Then we have two episodes of View with Vizard. In the first episode, Mike Vizard interviews Jerry Caponera, General Manager of Risk Quantification at Threat Connect, as Jerry explains what's required to successfully navigate cyber insurance now that the underwriters of these policies are putting more stringent requirements in place. Then Mike interviews Yulia Gontar, Strategic Growth Executive for Super Protocol, as Yulia explains how an open source project will enable confidential computing to be applied to a decentralized blockchain environment in the Web3 era to better secure data. And that's what we have coming up for you in this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy. Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for January 30th. First up, the FBI has successfully shut down the website of a well-known ransomware group named Hive, which specifically targeted hospitals and healthcare providers. The website became inaccessible late last week. A government advisory from last year reported that the group had affected over 1,300 companies globally and extorted about $100 million in ransomware payments. The successful shutdown is part of a broader effort by the Justice Department to address the increasing issue of ransomware, which has affected everything like healthcare with Hive to education and major enterprises. The problem of ransomware has garnered a lot of attention recently, and various methods have been employed to combat it, including traditional law enforcement tactics. Next, Nokia, a wireless and fixed network equipment maker, reported strong fourth quarter results due to a high demand for 5G technology. The company reported a net profit of $1 billion for the October through December period, a 27% increase from the previous year. The company's performance during the quarter exceeded predictions from analysts, with an incredible performance of the company's network infrastructure business unit. Zooming out, Nokia is one of the world's main suppliers of 5G, the latest generation of broadband technology, and Nokia has stated that it anticipates 23 to be a growth year as 5G rollout continues, though it must remain cautious with the current economic environment. In other news, IBM and SAP have both announced company-wide layoffs. IBM stated that the layoffs will affect 3,900 of its employees, which equates to about 1.5% of its workforce. SAP, on the other hand, announced that it plans to cut up to 3,000 jobs worldwide, which is around 2.5% of its workforce. These decisions come after a decrease in profits in what the companies are calling focusing on strategic growth areas. These job cuts are in line with the trend in the technology industry, with several tech companies like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft announcing layoffs recently. This being said, though, the layoffs at both of these companies show how corporate layoffs are affecting all tech companies, not just the high-growth ones. Next up, a year after the most destructive wildfire in Colorado's history, lawmakers are considering using artificial intelligence to detect and prevent future blazes. A Senate committee has voted to move forward with a bill that would create a $2 million pilot program to station cameras on mountaintops and use AI to monitor the footage and detect early signs of a wildfire. The program would support 40 fixed camera stations and 6 mobile stations that can be moved to monitor ongoing fires. The AI technology could even detect a small amount of smoke, which could help save lives and properties in remote areas. Ultimately, using AI would help avoid another fire like the one last year, showing how we are using these new technologies to fight old problems. The bill will now move to the State Senate Appropriations Committee for further consideration. On Container Journal, we have an article looking at how Atomic Jar has reached a public beta of its lightweight open source test container framework. Atomic Jar has stated that the Test Containers Cloud service is meant to make it easier for developers of cloud-native applications to test dependencies themselves. To learn more, go to containerjournal.com. On Digital CXO, we have an article looking at how to have a successful B2C business in 2023. Customers know what they want, and what that is a good digital experience. In fact, according to recently released research from Full Story, the digital experience is more important than the feelings about a brand. To learn more, go to digitalcxo.com. Finally, on DevOps.com, we have an article looking at how Atlassian has extended its automation framework to include the Confluence collaboration software. Atlassian has stated that the extension of the automation framework is part of its ongoing efforts to remove silos within the software engineering teams. To learn more, go to DevOps.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I've got a new company to introduce you to here on Techstrong, a company we haven't covered before. Got their co-founder, CEO, who is also a first-time guest here. Let me introduce you all to Adam Gavish of Do Control. That's DOCONTROL, and it's docontrol.io is the website. We'll get that out of the way if you guys want to check it out. Hey, Adam, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Hi, Alan. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you on. We always love to hear of new companies or companies that are new to us coming in the market. But I always like to start off, before we jump into the company, a little bit about the guest. So, Adam, if you don't mind, share with our audience. Give us a little bit of the Adam Gavish story.
Yeah, 100%. I don't like to speak about myself, so I'll make it very quick. So I've been in the US for 7 years, but clearly I'm from Israel. You could say by my horrible accent. I've been in the security space for a little bit over 18 years now. I started as a network security engineer, firewall, routers, load balancers, everything you put in a rack, I installed probably. Moved my way up to software engineering, hardcore backend engineering. And then I moved to the US to become a product manager, most recently at Google Cloud Security Team. Sure. Where I helped launching the Gov Cloud solution to help compete with Amazon and Microsoft over the federal market. And, when I worked there, I had to collaborate with a bunch of third-party vendors to push the business, right? I work with marketing agencies and researchers and consulting. And of course, I had to share information with them over Google Drive. And, every once in a while, security will open me a ticket telling me, hey, remove their permission, they're not employees. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm working with them. It's legit. And it happened again and again and again until I got to a point where I'm like, okay, let's put an end to it. I did what a good Googler would do. I took a bunch of cookies. I went to InfoSec and I asked them, why is it like that? And they told me, look, we have compliance requirements. We have liability. This is the company information. It can be exposed forever. And so I asked, okay, why don't you have a tool that can fix it up? Why do you need me, the end user, to help you out every single time? And they said something like, no, it's not so simple. And for good and bad, I'm Jewish. And when we hear somebody say it's not so simple, immediately we want to solve it.
Right.
That's like our immediate response. Like, okay, let's fix it.
Right. It should be.
That's why. And so that's why we started. Do control at a very high level. That's who I am. I'm married with three little boys. I like to ski, to run, to watch good movies.
Good for you. Where in the U.S. are you now?
I live in New Jersey, just outside of New York.
Okay, very cool.
Because I was going to say, you don't do a lot of skiing in Israel, and if you're once you're in the U.S., you can get to ski places. Me personally, I moved from New York, my accent, and I moved down here to Florida. The only skiing we do here is water skiing.
But that's
the best kind of ski.
That's a different kind of skis, exactly. So, Adam.
So I can't tell you. Look, I'm an entrepreneur myself, serial entrepreneur. I've done more than several venture-backed startups, but I've also over the years met, interviewed, dealt with business development, corp development, literally hundreds of entrepreneurs and founders, and probably the most common fact pattern I see with founders is, hey, I see a problem. I saw a problem not just at the company I was at before, but I saw this problem at the company before. It's been a problem. I've spoken to friends who have the same problem. And it's a problem that needs to get fixed. And that it became a passion. It moved from being a problem to a passion, right? I'm going to fix this problem. And it's in that maybe small way, big way, I'm going to make the world better for people like me who are living this and people who deal with it. So, I would say that's exactly the kind of story, the fact pattern that we see, behind so many startups today, behind so many successful businesses. That's what it often takes to get started. So, we live in a world of SaaS. We were talking off camera, and so many, especially mid-sized, but even larger companies, so much of their infrastructure today is based on third-party SaaS. And for good reason. It's convenient, right? It's there. Someone else went through the trouble of building it for you. It's usually more affordable. Rather than buying the whole farm, I could pay for it monthly, right? Or maybe annually, an annual contract based on a month, but it's cheaper. It's OpEx versus CapEx, right? From a financial point of view. And I think a lot of people say, you know what, let it be someone else's problem. I just want the damn thing to work. I don't care how they make it work, right? As long as it works, it's their problem. I don't have to worry about the infrastructure. I don't have to worry sometimes about the security even, which, in today's world, the hairs on what hair I have left stands up, when I hear that I'm not worried about the security. But let's talk about that. What do you see, with this, and how do you solve the problem?
So I see that I have a different way of looking at it.
Okay.
A different way. Like, I think that, people don't milk the cow anymore. They just go ahead and buy milk, right? Okay. And then they have three types of milk: expensive, mid, and cheap. That's how SaaS is today. It's standard. It's default. Mm-hmm. There's no other choice. There's no, on-prem is it's not a luxury to have on-prem anymore. It's a big pain. And so Now, when your default is SaaS, the question is, what kind of tools those SaaS applications give you to, first of all, understand the exposure that you may have ongoing, not because of your fault, but because of the general consumption of SaaS, right? Mm-hmm. And that exposure is very diverse, right? So the question is what tools those SaaS apps give you, even if you have to pay for it. And in many cases, you do have to pay for it, which is a shame. Right? Yeah. It's a shame that you have to pay for SSO. That should be very basic, but that's a different topic. So you have on one hand, the tools that SaaS apps give you. On the other hand, you have security teams who we don't have many of those. There's a talent shortage, right? And SaaS is just a fraction of everything they have to deal with. Endpoints, identity, network, insider risk, infrastructure, everything in between. But the biggest difference between those categories and SaaS is that SaaS is too abstracted, overly abstracted, in a way that you don't really have a lot of choices in order to protect it. Because if you onboard to a cloud infrastructure like AWS or Azure or GCP, you have hundreds of security features. 100. For every single feature, you have something you can put in to improve security, whether it's different encryption keys or different network management, it doesn't matter. You have it. It's not the case for SaaS. What do we do about it? Right? So I think at this point, security executives have realized that, whoa, we have to take control over that and never wait for SaaS ecosystem to do that for us, because that is not a revenue driver for them. It's just not. Right?
No.
And so we got to a point where it is a huge awareness about, okay, SaaS security is a thing that we need to take care of. So that's good. Yeah. Then the question is, what approaches are there in the market, right? Different vendors have different approaches and they deal with different threat models. And those need to be matched with your security strategy as a whole, right? And so I think that security leaders need to take a look and be honest with their SaaS estate and try to answer a very simple question. How much data do you have in SaaS? Who owns it? Across what business department? How is it exposed internally and externally, and sometimes even publicly? What data sensitivity are we talking about? Mm-hmm. For how long? Those are very simple questions you can answer today in AWS within a couple of queries. You cannot answer them across several SaaS applications. You absolutely cannot, even if you pay for all the features. So before you even think about a solution, you don't even understand what are you solving for. And that's the fundamental when you start a security program. What am I solving for? Does it make sense so far?
Yeah, no, to me it makes perfect sense. I live this. I want to make sure it makes sense out for our people too. I think when I look at the SaaS security problem, Adam, part of the issue is, look, if I only had one SaaS application, no big deal. I deal with that application provider and I make sure I got it straight. But I don't have one SaaS application provider. I have 30 or 50. We interviewed a company a while ago. They used to call it SaaS Ops, right? That you need a whole team. Forget just security. You need a whole team to manage the average SaaS, the amount of SaaS that we're dealing. So now I'm dealing with 30 to 50 different SaaS providers. And all of them only care about themselves, right? They don't care how it works with their next SaaS provider. But I do. I need a comprehensive security strategy that doesn't just deal with these 5, but it deals with all of them, right? And, we're talking about access and access control, identity and access control. What's the posture of the SaaS provider? How do I normalize that to my own risk policies, right? Because in some ways, when you use SaaS, I'm assuming their risk posture, and that's not necessarily mine, and that may not work for me, right? If I'm in finance or some heavily regulated industry. So these are the issues as I see them.
Yep.
I'm assuming that's what you're working with.
I agree. We see the same issue about the sprawl of SaaS application. And I think it's been tackled, first of all, from a financial perspective. How do you perform cost optimization, remove inactive licenses, consolidate features? I do that myself for due control, right? Mm-hmm. I don't approve more apps than usual if you don't need them because we're trying to build a sustainable business. But from a security perspective, I think that you need to ask yourself, where is the critical data is being stored and consumed? Because some SaaS apps are not so sensitive, to be honest. Some SaaS apps are just fantastic. I mean, Calendly, what can be there? A title with like an email. But of course, I'm not undervaluing the importance, but like some SaaS apps do not pose such a significant threat. And the whole game...
because they don't have access to critical data.
Exactly.
Unless you could use them to access other infrastructure.
That's my point. My point is that a good strategy would be, hey, why don't we map the SaaS app we have in terms of, whether or not they have access to our core SaaS storage. So if people log in to, Trello with the Google Drive credentials, that grants Trello programmatic access to our Google Drive tenant. And in that case, I want to know whether the access is legit, whether Trello is a legit, app certified by the Google Marketplace, whether the kind of permission they require makes sense for the business use case, whether they have access permissions, and if they even use those, right? That is super important because that can clarify and help you come up more ready for the tough conversation with your business stakeholders. Because at the end of the day, you have to go back to the head of X department and present them some concerning finding and come into an agreement, right? Because we don't work alone in security. We collaborate.
Right.
I call it security business partners.
Mm-hmm.
And so, while the spread of SaaS apps is concerning, it's important to narrow down the scope to truly solve the issue at first. Achieve a better baseline, if you like, right?
Yeah.
So it could be the programmatic access. It could be the actual data access. It could be the users that they have access. It could be who has admin and why they have admin. All this kind of stuff should be taken into consideration. And that leads me to my next point, where we don't quite see a platform in the market offering all of that. We don't, right?
No. I was sitting here thinking the same thing.
And we would say, you would think like, wait, where's Palo Alto? Where is CrowdStrike? The Zscaler of the world. Where are they been doing? What are they doing? And so they are still heavily invested in very profitable businesses, zero trust network access, endpoint detection, infrastructure security. Those are all very legit solutions that you and I use in a day-to-day. Mm-hmm. The next one would probably be SaaS security. It just takes time.
Yeah.
Well, so like I spoke to hundreds of entrepreneurs. Another common thread I heard: what's your biggest competitor? A spreadsheet. Do you know what I mean? This is a classic example. People may be keeping spreadsheet. You could see a security guy. I have a spreadsheet of all the SaaS apps that we're using here, and I'm trying to track them, right, with their individual postures and different differences. And look, if you can get into a market where your biggest competitor is a spreadsheet, you're doing good, because you should kill that, right? You got to be better than just a spreadsheet. And so it would seem to me, this is the right, to have a platform that does this is the right move. You mentioned CrowdStrike. And maybe I got it wrong, but who was the strategic investor, or you had a strategic investor in Due Control?
Yes, that would be CrowdStrike.
Okay, so obviously CrowdStrike saw this as a need in the market and made a bet here.
Yes, 100%. We are 100% aligned with them on the strategy and the future of this specific domain. They do see it as an emerging threat, and that's why they decided to invest. And we're very much happy about the relationship with them.
Absolutely. And Adam, the Do Control solution, it's fully available now, yeah?
It's available and adopted by some of the best tech and financial institutions in the world. It's fully available. And, I put my hand down and being very humble about it. I'm not going to brag about the solution. It's good. It's working. But I'm leveraging this opportunity to speak with you, not to do sales.
I understand. I just want to make sure for people who are out there and say, man, this is a problem. I'd like to go check this out right now.
My goal here is to raise awareness about the need for a SaaS security platform in 2023 to truly consolidate those solutions and cover as many mission critical threat models to help security team, again, understand how big is the problem across multiple SaaS security vendors, quantify it, go back to business partners, cut a remediation plan, fix, reduce the attack surface, and then hopefully automate ongoing. Right? That's the holy grail. Are we there? In some case, in some case, but no SaaS security vendor truly qualify for such category as of yet. But they will be, including us. And that's the point, right? Mm-hmm. We have to continue to innovate on behalf of customers to go ahead and solve those problems because nobody's going to buy 5 different SaaS security solutions.
No. I mean, no. And I think the other piece of this, too, is that in the regulatory climate that we find ourselves in now, and they're talking about new controls, software supply chain, SPOMs, all these things we're hearing about, new regulations in Europe, here in the U.S., I think it's going to be important that we have a SaaS compliance. And I assume this is going to be something, if it's not in Do Control, you're going to have to, right? For someone who needs to run a report about, hey, am I handling my SaaS applications in a reasonable manner, in a compliant manner, right? And here's my report to show that we are.
Yes, I agree with that. So here's the thing, though. Here's what the tricky part, right? And we have been going through a bunch of compliance audits and whatever, especially as a security vendor. It's much harder to achieve compliance on cloud service providers, on your infrastructure, because you have more tools to enforce security. There's so much more to audit, right? Versus SaaS, where it's way more abstracted. And yes, you do have a lot of controls in SaaS, especially across multiple ecosystems, but they don't go deep or nearly deep as your cloud infrastructure, where the majority of the compliance GRC team effort into bringing the evidence from the cloud infrastructure, right?
Sure.
And while there's an effort on SaaS, it's not comparable, in my opinion, to IF.
Got it. It's not. There's but to be fair, IAS now has been around, I'd say 2005, 2006, 15, 16 years, right? SaaS dominance like this, it's got some time to catch up. Adam, we're way over time. I promised you 15 minutes. I think we're over 20. I want to thank you for coming on, though, and telling us about Do Control. We wish you the best of luck. I think this is a really important area we're going to see more of in this coming year. So congratulations. Keep up the great work. Come back on and keep us posted.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. And I like your vibe. I love the show. Keep it up.
I appreciate it. Adam Gavish from Do Control here on Techstrong TV. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm really happy to introduce you. He's the first-time guest here with us on Techstrong TV. Aubrey Turner. Aubrey is with Ping Identity. I don't know, Aubrey, are they still called Ping Identity, or is it just Ping these days?
We are still called Ping Identity, although you can call us Ping, but some folks might get us confused with the golf company.
Yeah. You're not making clubs or balls or anything.
Right. Adding the identity helps to make sure that we're talking about the right people.
You know what? If the tech industry doesn't get any better, you might want to look at the golf business. But whatever. Let's hope not, man. Bad joke. Anyway, Aubrey, welcome to Techstrong TV. It's a pleasure to have you on here. Why don't we start with a little bit about Aubrey, who you are, what you do at Ping, your background.
Yeah, I'll just give you the career highlights, Alan, and thanks for having us on this morning. Pleasure to be here. So I've been in the cyber and identity space for about 20 years. I started my career in banking, took me to the consulting world, which is really where I got exposed to the cybersecurity. Well, I used to call it information security back when I got started. And then that took me into identity and privacy. A couple other stops along the way, and I've been here at Ping coming up on 3 years. So it's been if I was asked if I had planned this out, if I had envisioned kind of my career, I couldn't have, planned it or laid it out. I'm just kind of awesome that I'm in the cybersecurity space. And so just taking advantage of the opportunities that kind of came my way. So that's how it all came together for me.
I love it.
So what's your current position with Ping?
Yeah, so we've got a team called the Executive Advisor practice. And so I lead that team. We're really focused on answering, some questions for our customers and providing them insight into what's happening in the identity space. Many of our customers are curious, they're looking at their roadmap. They're curious about Ping's vision, like where is Ping headed? And they're curious about, the trends and patterns that they see or may have heard about that are, evolving in the identity and cybersecurity space. So how do they lean into zero trust, passwordless? They likely are on a journey to cloud. And at the end of the day, they're looking for, again, insight and a vision from Ping, looking for us to help enable those journeys that they're on, and how can sort of Ping map to their larger cybersecurity journey, be a team player as part of something like a zero trust strategy. So my team leads those conversations, provides those data points, and really at the end of the day, it's really about trying to enable our customers in their journey and help them maximize their investment in Ping and really solve their cybersecurity challenges. So that's what I do for Ping. Yep.
And look, just, again, level setting, Aubrey. I think a large part of our audience is familiar with Ping Identity. They heard the name. And I know, as we were talking off camera, I remember when Ping first kind of came out. It was out in Colorado at the time, and they were out there too. And, they kind of pioneered the whole federated identity space, which today it's almost like a take for granted given that we have this federated identity kind of functionality across the board. But of course, over the last, 15, 20 years, identity and access management, IAM, federated identity is only one piece of that much larger, more important, it's a strategic level type of solution that organizations need today. But why don't you, if you had to describe Ping to your wife's family or something like that, right? Your in-laws, what the heck does Aubrey do for a living anyway? How would you describe what Ping does?
Yeah, so it reminds me of kind of an old joke. When I first got into cyber, people asked me what I did. And I used to say, I'm the S in HTTPS.
I hear you. I've been having that conversation for a long time myself. But go ahead.
When people ask me what I do or what Ping does, I often talk about how we secure their login experience, right? They are and provide a better experience, a friction. Our mission is really frictionless identity, right, across the user journey. And whether that be whatever type of identity that is, whether it's a workforce, a B2B, and really consumer, which is a major focus for Ping. And so when I explain them, there are lots of applications and some of the largest banks, some of the largest healthcare are Ping customers, and friends and family, you may be using Ping and don't even realize it, right? And so we're trusted by some of the largest enterprises on the planet, certainly around the globe, to secure identities and really manifest a frictionless experience. That's really like a lot of our focus. So we see this, we have this kind of borderless world, right? And kind of use that term, like where we have the network is the internet. We've got partner and supply chain and data and apps and things that are running in data centers and cloud. And Ping becomes that identity control plane that allows that frictionless access for users and secures that entire journey. If I would boil it down to the kind of three things, identity, who you are, certainly authentication, or is this really you, right? And then authorization, Alan, can you do this specific act or consume this service, and hyper focused around that and hyper focused around the user journey. If I could say one last thing too, Ping certainly really focused on standards. We sit on a lot of standards. We've led a lot of standards bodies, to your point, in the federation space, SAML. We're getting ready to do that again. We're getting ready to pioneer decentralized, and we're part of pioneering decentralized identity. So stay tuned for sort of a lot more on that, and really flipping third-party trust models to first-party trust models. And so if you've heard the term decentralized or self-sovereign identity, maybe even personal identity, we're getting ready to, and part of pioneering how we change the model and paradigm in terms of how you and I use identity to access these things that, whether it be healthcare, banking, we're trying to buy stuff, make it as easy as possible. So that's what Ping does. And that's what, again, we're hyper focused on that frictionless identity experience, secure, convenient, fast, all of those things.
I love it.
Yeah.
I know we're going to talk a little bit about 2023 and what it looks like, but if you don't mind me diving into the weeds a little bit.
Yeah.
Humor me. So sure. I remember last year saying that IAM, Identity Access Management, is sort of the killer app for cloud security. And I don't think that's a revelation. I think it's pretty, people understand how important identity and access management is, not just for cloud, but for, so much of digital transformation and everything that we're, going through in the world. The whole system is sort of based on, I got to be able to know that you're you. And because you're you, what I'm going to let you do. Right?
Yep.
But a trend that I've seen over the last, 6 months, maybe it just bubbled up to me in the last 6 months, is sort of the cleaving of identity from access. Right? It used to be identity went with access. It was joined at the hip, sort of. But now I'm seeing, look, you being you is good, but just because I know you or you doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to let you go here, there, and everywhere. I'm going to have some other technologies, some other solutions that control access independent of identity.
I wonder
if you wouldn't mind commenting on that, Aubrey.
Yeah, I think what it comes immediately to mind, and kind of why you're seeing that, is zero trust, right? Yeah. Zero trust strategies, right? That at every interaction, right, I'm really going to, and again, if you think about, identity, identification, authentication, and authorization, I'm not just the days of sort of a binary authentication event or that ceremony. Those days we've got to move past them because of just the threat and the sort of the landscape of threats. And, if you're leaning into zero trust, whether you think it's a concept or principle or whatever your perspective is on it, the idea that I need to be more dynamic, I need to leverage things like risk signals to understand, not only that, hey, are you who you are? Are you a real person? Are you a bot? But subsequently, can you actually do this specific thing? And being able to, what we're referring to in some cases as policy-based access controls or rule-based access controls. So I think, if I'm going to summarize all of that, Alan, I think probably zero trust is why you might be seeing
it makes sense.
that perception that's separating. But honestly, I think that the lines are going to blur somewhat between identification and authentication, right? I think because of the need to have stronger identity proofing and identity verification, those lines are going to largely blur, because if I have the strongest assurance that you are who you are, you're not a robot, you're not a bot, then can I just take you right into that authentication and grant you access, manage your entitlements in a sort of a more modern kind of seamless way. But that's probably why I'd say zero trust is probably why you're seeing some of those, some of the perception that those lines are probably, again, a little bit further apart, when in fact, I think, like I said, identity and authentication probably get a little closer together eventually.
Fair enough. And I think certainly zero trust was a big theme in 2022. It'll continue to be in 2023.
Yeah.
2023 is already off to a rocky start. In the tech industry, we're seeing stuff we haven't seen in a long time. But even in cyber, the bad guys never take a day off, Aubrey.
They don't. They certainly don't.
Yeah.
We're seeing stuff. But what do you see? I mean, let's talk 2023 with you. Kind of what's your kind of crystal ball telling you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm predicting, I'm not Nostradamus, Alan, but we're going to see much of the same, right? As you're well aware, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of breaches. A lot of them related to identity compromise, stolen credentials. So we're going to see much of that. We've got, and I love the point that you brought up, right? There is a cyber war being waged, that most of us are not even really aware of, right? It's unlike conventional war, but that we're not seeing it, right? So there's nation states and organized crime and all this stuff. So there's all this stuff going on that, again, common folks, probably the general public is probably not necessarily aware of or immediately impacted by. So, in terms of what, I think will happen in 2023, I think, like I said, we're going to see, more interest in things like identity proofing, because some of those factors and some of those threats, we're going to continue to see the migration to cloud. I think we'll continue to live in a hybrid state. But to your earlier point, right, identity needs to become that control plane that secures all of that, right? As I said, the network is the internet, and you've got data and apps running in various places. How we secure that, identity-centric zero trust is a key theme. So I continue to see that migration to cloud. The regulatory environment, as it relates to privacy and legislation, there were two new privacy laws, California, and I'm forgetting the other state. The implications of that just for here in the United States, but also if you think about sort of global privacy laws, the implications for identity are significant, are massive. And so, how that influences how we protect, protect people's identity, make sure their information is secure, honor their, respect their consent and privacy. I think I all see those are sort of key themes going into 2023. Part of our mission here at Ping is really focused on taking the unknown to known, right? And again, as that user goes through that journey, securing each of those interactions. So we're hyper focused on that, and a lot of these things are a lot of the things that are happening in the world today. Certainly, really impact how we do our jobs, and again, how we help our customers solve these identity challenges and be more secure. I guess I'll really add to that, supply chain and resiliency, I think, are some key sort of themes that we've got to be focused on, and not only resiliency in our customer, on our SIAM platforms, but certainly critical infrastructure. All of those things, I think, are trends and themes that we're seeing, conversations, things that, again, in my role, our customers are asking us about it. What are you seeing? How are others dealing with this? So those are some things I think that, will again, continued themes. And like I said, the threat landscape, I think, is just going to continue to remain the same, if not more. I don't have any actual data, right? But like, it seems like when there's more economic uncertainty, there's good actors that potentially become bad actors. And that's again, another area where Ping is trying to focus.
Enticing.
Right. People are looking for, it's a lot more enticing to people to say, I can make a quick buck.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a little illegal. All right, I'm going
it's
from
just a
white
little
to gray
illegal
instead of black hat. Yeah.
Well,
and it becomes, desperate times, desperate people.
Right. It's just a little illegal. That's just like being a little pregnant. That's not a thing, right?
I hear you.
That's not a thing. Part of what we're trying to do is really provide the intelligence to detect, does somebody have a propensity, or are they moving from being that good actor to a bad actor, and providing our customers the intelligence to make those decisions as part of that whole journey, right? Identity, signals, authentication, certainly, and then the authorization, which is really where we're seeing, by the way, and this is a kind of I think we're going to see far greater interest in that those policy-based access controls, dynamic authorization. You've proven who you are. Now I've got to figure out, can you actually do these things under these circumstances, and being able to apply risk in the context of that authorization and making that dynamic. And again, those are things that we're hyper-focused on helping our customers with.
Agreed. I think a word you used right in the beginning of our interview today applies as well. That's frictionless.
Yeah.
We got to do all of this without being too much of a PIA to users.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's got to be frictionless. They got to be able to hop, skip, and jump and do what they need to do. Whether they're a consumer or a B2B or whatever, people want to be able to get on with it. The other thing is resiliency. I don't think security people, let alone the rest of the world, understand that part of the mission is resiliency, right? We may not be able to stop every incident.
Yeah.
But can we prevent every incident from bringing us to a standstill? Right? Can we recover?
Can we
reroute, whatever the case may be? Resiliency is a big part of it. Aubrey, we're over time, but man, I really enjoyed our conversation today. We didn't even mention website for people who want to get more information about Ping and maybe about the group you're heading up over there.
Yeah. Yep. So of course, pingidentity.com. And I always make myself available to our customers and prospects that are, curious, not only about Ping, certainly, but, the larger identity and cybersecurity space. So,
cool.
I'm here to support those conversations. Really, again, thank you for your time, Alan. And
thank you.
Great conversation.
All righty. Aubrey Turner from Ping Identity taking time out of, their sales kickoff meeting to come talk with us here on Techstrong TV. Aubrey, thanks so much. Come back and visit us soon.
Yeah, love to. Thank you.
All righty. This is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong TV. We're going to be back in a moment.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the CD Pipeline. The CD Pipeline is a monthly show in partnership with our friends at the CD Foundation, part of the Linux Foundation, and us here at Techstrong Group, where we focus in on topics of interest to those of you who are interested in CD, continuous delivery, and hence the CD Foundation. My co-host for this entire series is my friend Laurie LaRussa, who besides being a developer advocate with JFrog, is also a main player. I'm going to let her explain her background with the CD Foundation. Hey, Laurie, Happy New Year. It's our first show after the new year. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you. And what a new year it's been already. I think January 2023 has slapped us all in the face a little bit. So it's good to see some familiar faces and some friendly faces, because we could always use a good cheer up. So thank you again, Alan, for partnering with the CDF. My name is Laurie LaRusso. I work for JFrog, and I am the Marketing Outreach Chair for the CDF. And we are very happy to be a part of Techstrong TV and to be able to bring you all of these cool new things happening in the CDF and in the world of continuous delivery.
Absolutely. And Laurie, just, for those of you who have watched previous episodes, last year we kind of focused on some of the great projects that the CDF manages, right? And there are, I think, 8 or 9 of them. They're fantastic. Some really big ones in there. We're changing things up a little for the new year in that we're focusing on some of the other topics of interest that our audience, I think, will be very interested in activities around what the CDF's involved with. Today's show is going to really focus in on interoperability, right? And to something I learned from one of our panelists, Melissa, today, right? We really want to focus on interoperability, not necessarily integration. Is that fair enough? And you know what? The CDF has spun up a special interest group on this interoperability, and we're going to hear from some of its members today. We have an amazing panel of speakers. Laurie, if it's okay with you, would you like to introduce our panel?
Sure. So let me start, since you mentioned the interoperability SIG, let me start with my colleague, Melissa McKay, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi. Yeah, I've been a developer for many, many years, so very interested in all things CI/CD. I'm currently a developer advocate with JFrog, and today I'm representing the special interest group that is part of the CD Foundation. This is an awesome group of folks who've gotten together, all of us from different backgrounds, different organizations, willing to talk about how we can better improve interoperability among all of our products.
Excellent. Thanks, Melissa. Welcome.
Thanks.
And so let me introduce Dadisi, who is a part of many instances within the CDF. So Dadisi, go for it.
Good morning. My name is Dadisi Sandika, and I am an engineering manager with Apple. I'm also on the Spinnaker Technical Oversight Committee, as well as the CDF Outreach Committee.
Dadisi, welcome.
So then Emil, who is someone, I think what's really great about this show is, like you said, Alan, we talked about sort of some of the past and projects, the future of CI/CD and continuous delivery. And Emil happens to be one of our project founders that came out of a SIG. So Emil, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I'm Emil Bäckmark, calling in from Sweden. And I'm employed at Ericsson as a CI/CD architect. I've been working with tools-related development for many, many years. And the late years, of course, in all continuous practices, continuous integration, delivery. And I've been also involved in the Continuous Delivery Foundation since a bit more than actually 3 years now. I was there in the beginning when SIG interoperability was created. And since then, I've also been involved in creating the special interest group for events, and which eventually then founded, as you said, Lori, a project called CD Events, which I'm the co-creator of. So looking forward to this chat about interoperability.
Thank you, Emil, and thank you for all your work over the last 3 years.
And last, by no means least, is the one that keeps us all in check, Executive Director of the CDF, Fatih.
Hi everyone, thanks Alan and Louis for having us. My name is Fatih Dermenci. I joined the Linux Foundation in June 2022 to lead the Continuous Foundation. And prior to Linux Foundation, I worked for Ericsson as an open source developer, contributed multiple projects within Linux Foundation and elsewhere. And I was there when CD Foundation was announced in 2019 March, so I've been contributing to the community since its inception. I have deep passion around the topic interoperability.
Thank you, and thank you for the work you're doing with CD Foundation. People look at it and they don't realize what goes into actually running these things day to day. They don't run themselves. So thank you. So interoperability, right? So I'm not a big fan usually of defining something by what it's not. And I opened it up by saying, well, interoperability is not integration. That's great. But what do we mean by interoperability, especially as it relates to CD, right? And I think, Melissa, you got the SIG. It's the interoperability SIG. It goes to the heart of it, right? Why don't we start there, guys? Let Melissa kick it off, and then feel free, everyone, to jump in and give us your thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really important to make that distinction between interoperability and integration, because often, especially with commercial products, we discuss integrating with other products out there, whether open source or off the shelf, and that's important because your teams are going to be made of different skill sets. We want to be able to make the choice of all of the different tools that we use for CI/CD. Having that freedom is really important. The problem that we are trying to tackle, though, right now is interoperability, meaning not strong glue code between certain products or projects. We would rather have interoperability, meaning you can plug in, whichever tool you like that works for your team. This would help you stay away from a lot of maintenance tasks for this glue code, having things break every time you have one particular tool in your tool set upgrade, things like that. And that's what our group really likes to do. I joined the special interest group, the interoperability special interest group, a couple of years ago. I'm now co-chair of that group. And that's something that we like to discuss, making sure that our developers are, being able to work efficiently with all of the different tools that they need to use within their organization.
Panel, anybody else have thoughts on that? No? So let me kind of do a little table setting here. If there was one dominant CD tool that 85% of the market used, right back in the heyday of Windows, 90% of the market, right? Apple was always chugging away. We wouldn't have to worry about interoperability. We'd probably all suffer as a result of less innovation and things that we saw stagnate the PC market like in the 80s and 90s. But the fact is the CD market today is a dynamic market of more than several fantastic solutions. There are several that the CD Foundation themselves manage, right? Spinnaker being one, for instance, Jenkins being another, right? Just off the top of my head. But there are non-open source CD tools that are very good as well. And, when you talk large enterprises, it's very hard to do standardization around tools. You have some teams using one thing, some teams using something else. It's the rare bird where you really are standardized enterprise-wide. And so, that's a real conundrum for managers, right? Do we have all these people existing kind of in their own private Idahos? Or is there some sharing of data? Is that, if I want to move from one to the other, do I have to go back to Go? and not get my $200 or anything, right? Wouldn't it be a great world if we could pretty rapidly sub in one or the other, or at least take information from one or the other and, and decide which is the best tool for the job?
And I think that leads to the question as to why it's critical, right? So, DC, why do you feel like interoperability is integral and super important in today's workflow?
Well, I think interoperability is the difference between just, as was already said, just gluing things together. But also the key to this is being able to collect metrics from system to system to system as any process steps through. My goal, and particularly as a part of Spinnaker, is to ensure that as we grow, as the product continues to evolve, it's very, very simple, almost intuitive to be able to connect to it and get information about the other things that you connect to. Interoperability, especially specifically this work that CDF is doing, is going to really impact my ability and Spinnaker's ability to not only connect, but to give information about workflow as you move from system to system with the products within the CDF. This is groundbreaking stuff. This isn't, just, let's connect some things and see what happens. It's let's understand our ecosystem end to end.
Agreed. Emil.
Yeah, I could actually very much second that. I really agree with you there, Dodisi. So I would also say that interoperability actually in some way drives observability in your system. So if you have interoperable components in your system, they will then automatically become observable by some using those standard interoperable interfaces that they use, as long as you can somehow monitor the interfaces, the traffic flowing between these components in some way. So I think observability actually comes with interoperability to a large extent.
Yeah. May I add one small key thing? It is the fact too that there's so many projects that are involved in CDF that are able to do this, and what the goal, or what I'm hoping that comes out of all of this, is that I don't have to impede anyone's, idea of how they should use their system. You mentioned that it's difficult to have like systems, CD systems in a large corporation. I would argue that it's almost impossible. But with this effort that the CDF is doing to create interoperability, now these pieces can be joined together. And once joined together, those metrics can be common, and that's huge. That is a game changer in this industry.
It is. I wondered. So you have the CDF, 3+ years, and if I mispronounce, I'm doing my best with names. Fatih, yeah. So Fatih, how critical is the interoperability to the CDF's mission?
I think interoperability is one of the key initiatives we have within the Continuous Delivery Foundation, because if we talk about the projects we have within Continuous Delivery Foundation, as you mentioned, Alan, we have 9 projects there, and half of those projects are around continuous integration, continuous delivery orchestration projects. And if we look at other half of the projects, we have like microservice and S1 project, Ortelius. We have package build and distribution project, Persia. We have CD events. I think the focus around interoperability, when we talk to many different people and organizations, they mainly think in the terms of continuous delivery orchestration systems. But if we think typical production systems, that the continuous delivery pipelines are actually production systems within organizations, those systems consist of multiple different tools and projects. As I mentioned, we have the orchestrators like Jenkins, Spinnaker, Tekton. We have the artifact repositories. We have the visualization systems. And the key to connect all these different systems is to have interoperability within the ecosystem. If we don't have interoperability within the ecosystem, if the Continuous Delivery Foundation is not putting effort into this area, then it will be very difficult for projects and users and vendors to actually come up with innovative solutions, because majority of the organizations will then spend their times to integrate these different types of tools with each other. So interoperability, I see interoperability as enabler of the innovation or fueling the innovation, Because once you have the metadata standardized, once you have the interfaces defined, then everyone can develop against those interfaces using the standardized metadata. Then they come up with new solutions, new projects that actually helps the organizations further. So I see Interworld as the critical piece for innovation within Context ecosystem, and Context Foundation is pushing the topic forward last couple of years.
I like that. So, Lori, I'm going to ask you to put your JFrog hat on for a moment here now. Okay. It's green. As a vendor, why is interoperability important to you?
Well, specifically,
or is it?
Well, I think specifically with JFrog, our whole idea is to be seamlessly integrated with whatever the workflow is that you have. So whenever you bring us on board, whether you're on-prem, hybrid, cloud, multi-cloud, we want to be able to work what's best for you and the way that you work best within your orgs. And to DGC's point, we have clients that are multiple, orgs that set everything up differently to their own specifications. And we want to be an easy piece of that puzzle that can help you just move your projects forward. And so this is super important to us. And what I think is really cool is that like Emil, started with the CDF, was on the interoperability SIG, and then created a project, CD events. And I think, it'd be interesting to see how you came to that, Emil. How did you take from working on a SIG to then deciding, oh, no, we need to take this a step further and really create a project? Because I think CD events is in what, version 0.2 now?
0.1 still, yeah. 0.1.
0.1. Okay.
Yep.
So if you want to give us how that happened.
Yeah, sure. So as I said in the beginning there, I started in the SIG interoperability group where Fatih was the driver of that group from the beginning, actually. And we quite early, we talked about vocabulary and this terminology that we've already mentioned here today. So we initiated something that we called the Rosetta Stone of CI/CD, where we define some terms that are common between different tools. And then in parallel to that, we also started to discuss what could we then do for interoperability? How could we create interoperable interfaces with our different tools that we see in the CI/CD ecosystem? And one idea that was brought there was about events. So having events that are broadcast over a message bus of some kind would make it possible then to communicate, to make different tools communicate with each other. Some tools send the events and another tool consumes them. And not just interoperable in that sense that the flow of execution could flow through over these events, but also the observability could be adopted onto that system. So the observability or metric system, for that matter, could just listen to these events as well. And the consumers or the other producers, the producer or the other consumers of the events wouldn't need to really know about who is now listening to this information. So it makes it very, very easy to plug and play these different tools into a system if you have a broadcast messaging system as the interoperability interface there. And therefore, we started this special interest group events, which was part of the special interest group interoperability from the beginning, but then it became its own interest group. And as I said in the beginning as well, from there we then started to look at what would an event protocol like this look like, so that all tools that adhere to this protocol could both produce and consume the information that is sent in these events.
Excellent. So to me, this is why we have foundations like the CDF, right? To come up with these kinds of, it's one thing to manage Spinnakers and Jenkins and Perseer and all these things, but to see this as a whole in the tool chain here, in the tool set, and come up with these projects like a CD event is really the justification for why you have a CD foundation, right? This is going to make people's lives, and well, it's not going to cure diseases, but it's going to make their jobs easier. It's going to make their work easier, and that's imperative, So it's in point one. Where do you see it going, and how soon?
I guess that's to me again.
Yeah, I'm sorry to put you on the hot seat, but if anyone else wants to jump in, feel free.
If I can, there's one thing I want to say about
go ahead.
Go ahead.
What Emil and his group has done really, really well is they've taken a look at this process that he mentioned, not just as an event bus, but as driving system to system. And what attracted me, because I am fairly new to the CDF, I met Fatih in June, literally on my birthday, and it was a beautiful present, by the way, guys, and I really appreciate being here. It's the fact that it can drive a system to system as well as store these events, and the thoughtfulness and the approach about collecting the information that's defined in each step of the event without forcing, an individual paradigm and leaving you space to kind of build your system the way you want to. One of the key things about Spinnaker is it doesn't just deploy to the cloud, it deploys everywhere. And so the need for something that's simplified and interoperable from system to system. The system is really complex, but they very elegantly kind of just simplified it down, kept the descriptions really, really just in line with everything that every system that we have to connect to does. And I think that's brilliant and should be called out. Emil's work has been wonderful.
I agree. Absolutely. Melissa, I want to come back to you for a second. What's interesting is all of this. I mean, Fadi himself really was with the SIG from day one, it sounds like, right? Everyone here was with the SIG. Give us an idea of, how many folks are involved in the SIG? How often do they meet? How do they communicate? People out here are watching saying, man, maybe I'd like to be involved in that.
Absolutely. And I think this is a good follow-up to what was just said too, because this group is not authoritarian. We're not out to say, thou shalt run your systems this way. That's not how this group works. We invite the community, all of these vendors, this is an avenue for all of you to come together and bring your insights and your thoughts. And specifically, we appreciate Dadisi joining the group and talking to us about things that he's looking for, things that are important to him and in his organization. And we have that with several different people. The group itself, if you were to go to cd.foundation, there's a very important tab there called Community. And within that tab, it gives descriptions of all of the special interest groups that we have, interoperability being one of them. We meet bi-weekly. Those are open to the public. Anyone can come in. We announce our agenda ahead of time. Usually we'll bring in speakers from other projects that we're interested to look at. And then we'll have, discussion points around interoperability that come up doing that. We also have a Slack channel that you can sign up for in that same tab, that community tab. That's important information to get involved with other folks and get other people's opinions so that we can talk asyncly about things. And the group itself, it changes in size, just depending on what we're talking about. Recently, we're talking about starting, another work group that may have another time and place that they meet to talk about a very specific item. That's how CD events came about. Now we're starting to talk more about pipelines and how everyone speaks the pipeline language. And, maybe that is something that we should look at attempting to standardize. So it's not so difficult to move between build servers, for example, and being able to, experience the benefits of a different product without having the heartache and the problems of training a bunch of developers on something brand new, or having that decree come down, which is puts a bad taste in people's mouths when they get used to a certain project or certain product that they are accustomed to. So that's what I really like about this group. Fatih was one of the first that I met. I was really impressed with how this is run. So yes, open to the public. Please join our meetings. We would love to hear from you.
Excellent. So I got another kind of topic and I'm going to throw this out to the whole panel, Lori, including you. You know, one of the nice things about interoperability versus, let's say, integration is I'm not interested in doing an API or an integration between Spinnaker and Jenkins, right? What we're looking to do is to create sort of like what sounds like what CD Event is doing. We're looking to create broad kind of data plane or points that all of these tools can work on. Now, it's easier when those tools happen to also be part of CDF. But what about all of those CD tools that aren't part of CDF, right? Are they included in here? Thought of, how are they, because if you're going to be industry-wide, you're going to be industry-wide. Fadi, I'm going to ask you to kick that off because, hey, it's your job. How do you work with non-project
tools there?
Yes, I think as one of the first things you mentioned, Alan, when we start this episode is continuous delivery ecosystem has lots of different tools and technologies, and they are all great in what they are doing. And we are not definitely saying this tool is better than that, because it's up to the users to pick and choose the right tool for the job. If they want to use tool X for certain reason and want to use tool Y for the rest of their pipelines, for example, they are free to do that. And why the projects that are not part of Continuous Delivery Foundation should care about this work or CD-WAN's project is that because it is important for us to enable our users. Our users must be or should be happy to use what the communities are developing, and they should have option or choice to make decisions for themselves rather than forcing or imposing certain way of doing things or certain tools to do those things, because the organizations are different, the scale is different, the types of products they are developing are different. And if we have the choice, then that is where the innovation will come up, because I always focus on that one, because the Continuous Delivery Foundation and other foundations are actually there to provide home for the projects as well as provide forum for projects, individuals and users and vendors to come and innovate together. And the projects that are not hosted within the Continuous Delivery Foundation should actually look at what's happening within the CD events and special interest group events and special interest group interoperability to see how they can make use of what has been developed within this community, because the projects are not developing these things themselves alone, or the group is not developing these things themselves alone. These things are kind of collective knowledge of years of effort coming from all these different types of organizations. And if the projects want to be ahead of the curve and adopt these things and support and give the best user experience for their users, then they should be looking at what's happening within the interoperability topic. So yes, if the projects are after improving developer experience, developer productivity, organizational excellence, the interoperability and the CD-WANs are key in achieving those.
Y'all are like mad scientists, but like in a good way. You're taking all of your collective frustration and all of the things that you've learned along the way to create these new projects, these new SIGs, these new interest groups. And then you sit there and you talk and you actually come up with solutions, which is awesome to watch from an outsider looking in. So just, this conversation alone, seeing how CD events grew out of a special interest group of the interoperability special interest group, which became its own special interest group, then became a project. I think that's one thing that this community I've been watching for the last couple of years. You guys get to work, you have problems and you want them solved, and you want to make it better for the next generation of developers and the current generation of developers that are trying to move things forward. So it's to be applauded, and being in version 0.1, moving things forward, it's awesome, because starting a project, vendor neutral, all that stuff isn't easy. So it's really cool to see how Spinnaker has grown, CD Events is growing, the SIG is blossoming. Yeah. Mad scientists in a good way.
I would also like to exemplify, actually, if I may, with the from your question there, Alan, on other tools outside the CD Foundation, because in the very early days of the events discussions within the SIG interoperability, we had a core group, a work group, where actually people from Captain, an event-driven CD system from Dynatrace, was involved, and also people from Harness, CI/CD as a service, proprietary system, more or less, at that time at least. So they were already at that time involved in the work driving the event protocol at that time. So that was great fun.
Yeah, no, but that's the realities of the market, right? You do have the Harnesses and these other folks, Dynatrace or out there, and to Fadi's point, right? CD Foundation is not in the business of dictating to developers or DevOps folks what CD tool they should use. Whatever CD tool is the best tool for them, and there's a lot of reasons why people choose tools. Right? It's not always necessarily the very best tool. It's what's best for them, not what everyone else may think is best or better, as we all know. And I think that's an important, when you're dealing with the Linux Foundation and not-for-profits and open source, it's important to remember that, right? Is that we're not here dictating to you. Right, we want to be inclusive. Everybody's invited. Come in and say your points. Guys, I'm just looking at the questions that we wanted to start off with and make sure we hit. And there's a bunch more here than I had in my thing. Lori, if you want to make sure we've hit some or any that we've missed, because we're coming in probably, we only have maybe 7-10 minutes tops left.
No, I think we've hit everything that we wanted to talk about. I think the discussion has been really free flowing, and I would throw it out to the panelists. Like, what is the one thing that you would like to let the community in general know why this is important, and what your work is aiming to help them do? If they're just completely like, this doesn't make any sense to me, I'm just going to live in my own bubble. Like, how can you expand and let them know why this is important?
Well, one of the things that I think is important to the open source community is that this particular project, this effort with CD events, isn't just going to, make the tools that are in the CDF portfolio interoperable. It's going to create opportunity for new projects. As Emil mentioned, it's an event-based system, and there are still key components to this event-based idea that you can build off of, both from observability, both from how you collect the information. He mentioned Captain being an event-driven system. I think there's some simplicity both of the idea of how to do this, and that it fits so well with the process of how we think through any tools in the build system or continuous delivery workspace, that having this be event driven creates a lot of opportunity. And it's that opportunity that we're trying to get out and communicate. There are going to be a lot of things to build, a lot of ways to think about things, because if the systems that you bring in-house can be connected, then the points of information, how you use that information, and how you explain to management like what's going on, like all of these things become really, really available and fascinating, right? It's just really just changing how we think about continuous delivery.
Absolutely. You know what? Another topic, certainly it's like topic number one in 2023, it seems. We here at Techstrong, we did an event called Predict 2 weeks ago. And it's kind of our predictions or what we think is important. I had an amazing panel, right? I had Fred from JFrog, one of the co-founders of JFrog. I had CloudBees CEO. I had KK, the founder of Jenkins, and the CMO, Chief Strategy Officer, acting CTO of GitLab. So some big DevOps companies, right? And all of them said, you know what? Well, GitLab's is not even calling it DevOps anymore. They're calling it DevSecOps. JFrog, Fred, security is a primary focus. Everyone is talking about security. So I'm going to assume, and assuming is a bad thing, I know, but I'm going to assume that security has raised its head here, that security has become, certainly something on the agenda for CD events, for interoperability, because that would be a real punch in the eye, right? If we enabled an interoperability, but in doing so opened up some security holes. So first at the SIG level and then at CD events. Melissa, where has security kind of checked in here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the important reasons why we want the community involved, because the community concerns are what we talk about, and that has definitely come up. I'm actually going to give this to Emil because he's got more specifics on discussions there, pertaining to CD events.
Sure, yeah, I will. So before we go there, I just want to mention that we also have another special interest group in the CDF called Software Supply Chain Security, which actually has this as a primarily topic to discuss security in the software supply chain. So that's a cool group that you should also visit if you're interested in this topic. So when it comes to security and events, we haven't really come to any final specifications there yet, but we are looking into it. We have discussions being started on how to integrate the different aspects of security into these attestations and everything, encryptions and such things that you would need to tell that you have built artifacts that are secure and not tampered with and so on. So those discussions are coming. They're not yet there in the protocol yet, but we are looking out to find people that can help us drive in those parts of the protocol. So yeah, it's a very interesting area, and I would really much like to have that as part of the roadmap for this year to get in the security aspects of the events as well.
That definitely makes sense. I mean, all of us are concerned about provenance now. If we're going to have this system that delivers artifacts from one tool to another or metadata from one tool to another, obviously we need to be careful about what we're doing there and making sure that we're not opening ourselves up to attacks. Again, that's the importance of getting more folks involved in our groups so that we can reveal those holes soon and early and come up with solutions to solve for that.
Thank you. Lori, one of the things, listening to the team here, to the panel, one of the things for a future show is we should just do sort of an org chart, if you will, of CDF, right? With all of the different special interest groups and SIGs and committees, more than the projects, so that people can really see how it's blueprinted and where they can get involved.
I love that you framed it as a team, because I really do feel like there's 9 projects within the CDF, and all of the projects are always looking for ways to work within the other CDF projects to see how they can work together. In addition to what you're saying, the SIGs, the outreach committee, we're working on workshopping some ideas to help template out some other programs to make things easier for projects to move forward. And so I'm 100% behind giving some light to the people that are behind the scenes that are running those SIGs and showing all of the different various aspects of what is involved within the CDF. It's not just our 9 projects that keep us going. It's all of the people behind the scenes continually innovating, coming up with new reasons to have interest groups, new discussions, new side topics, and then developing new projects for sure, 100%.
Very cool. All right. Hey guys, we're about out of time here for this month's show. You know what, Emil, people like you are what make open source go, right? I mean, you are to me that's the Horatio Alger, as we used to say in the U.S., right? People who just make it happen. They work hard and they make things happen. They see a problem, they see something that needs a solution, and they go for it. And we wouldn't have the success of the Linux Foundation or CDF without people like that. So thank you especially for all that you've been doing and continue to do. But thank you to all of you, right? Thank you to all of you and to you out here folks who, whether you are members of the Linux Foundation as an individual or you work for companies that are part of the Linux Foundation, or you go to the KubeCons or CDF cons or what have you, it's that support that makes all of these things possible. Because unfortunately, fact of the matter is it takes money to run these things. It takes resources, it takes time, it takes people. So thank you. Thank you out there. Thank you for being on here. Laura, you want to wrap it up?
Sure. So again, thank you, Alan and Techstrong TV for having us host the CD pipeline. Thank you to the panelists. Again, as Melissa stated earlier, if you would like to find out more about the CDF, go to cd.foundation and you can learn more. There's tons of information on that. Additionally, CDCon is coming up. Our abstracts close February 10th, and the event is May 8th and 9th in Vancouver, Canada. We're embedded within Open Source Summit North America, which is really cool. We've partnered with GitOpsCon. So the first 2 days of the week are us, and then the rest is Open Source Summit North America, and we're really excited about that. So again, thank you to you, Alan. Thank you to the panelists, and look forward to the next show.
Absolutely. This is CD Pipeline here on Techstrong TV. We hope you've enjoyed it. We'll see you next month with another great show.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everybody. Mike Rothman here with another Techstrong TV interview. I'm just ecstatic this morning to be able to welcome Danielle Cook to the show, who's CMO of Fairwinds. You've seen her on all sorts of stuff with Techstrong before. They do all sorts of activities with us. So we're pleased to welcome you to the show, Danielle. How you doing this morning?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here with you.
Yeah. So what we want to talk about today, we're kind of at the beginning of 2023, and, Kubernetes is one of these, technologies that everybody's talking about. So I want to talk about that, right? I want to talk about, kind of what we see for Kubernetes in 2023. Want to, kind of relay that and substantiate that with some, recent data that we've gathered with our pals at Fairwinds. We'll be issuing a pulse meter in the very near term, focused specifically on Kubernetes. So we're excited about that. It's one of the subjects of our cloud native trends that we introduced at Predict a couple of weeks ago, just really about how the maturation of Kubernetes is something that we're really expecting to see in 2023. So do you agree that? Do you see that, Danielle? I mean, what is, from your standpoint, the state of Kubernetes in 2023?
The state is interesting. You have organizations that are so mature and they're doing all the coolest things, and they've adopted all the, CNCF, cloud native open source. They are, out there, and it is the poster child for Kubernetes. Then you have organizations that are just coming to bat, and the mix is interesting. And even at large enterprise organizations, you have people who, smaller teams that are trying it out and testing it, and maybe they have one or two apps in production on it. And then you have startups that their entire business is built on Kubernetes. So I find it really interesting, the evolution we're going through, and how, going to some of the events around Kubernetes, you see people, it's like this trend of, oh, it's all the newbies. Okay, now they're sophisticated. Oh, it's the newbies. Now it's sophisticated. And I think we're continuing to ride that trend at the beginning of this year.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the data really supports that. So one of the questions we asked of the community is, how many production apps are you operating in Kubernetes now? And it was, a decent mix. You had 25% that were none, right? 15% that were 1, 6% 2, 15% 3 to 5, 31% 6 or more, right? And I think that's interesting, right? That's a snapshot of the end of 2022, right? If we look at it, what would be the end of 2023, I would expect that those numbers are are, kind of significantly different. Again, there are going to be folks that are just not getting there. So the none may not, work as much, but I think, 3 to 5, 6 or more are going to be substantially larger just because folks are learning, right? Folks are starting to, get their arms around what this is. They're starting to understand the distributions. They're starting to understand, kind of the managed offerings from the cloud providers that allow them to, get up and running a lot faster and really shield them from a bunch of the complexity there. But it gets back to, what are some of the things that you think we need to improve on to really allow and enable, both more folks to onboard with Kubernetes, but also really to scale the environment up? Are there some things that, you think just have to happen? Say that 10 times fast.
Yep. Well, I think, you can scale, you can just spin up a cluster, right? And you can try using Kubernetes and you can do it on GKE and, AKS and whatnot. But if you want to use it and put it in production, you have the challenges around, do you have security implemented? Do you have role-based access control? What are your costs associated with it? And, are the people who are using the platform that you've created doing the right things? Do they even know how to configure Kubernetes? And I think that's the challenge that we've seen as developers are becoming, the people who need to be doing these end-to-end, development cycles, where platform engineering or the DevOps teams are going, okay, we need to arm them to do the right thing. So, certainly with, some of the questions we were asking in Pelt's Meter, it's, do you have guardrails in place? Do you have security controls in place? Do you have cost controls in place? And we're seeing people don't have these things. If you want Kubernetes to work and you want your platform to work, you need those things in place.
That's right. And we take a lot of that stuff for granted, right? So I was just doing another webinar before we jumped on, and it was really about, kind of multi-cloud and how do you decide what workload goes into, what cloud provider. And I would tell stories because I'm an old guy, right? Of old data center and, we didn't have the reliability that you get out of the cloud providers, would be something that everybody would, give an arm, a limb for, back in the day of our own data centers. And we're bitching about, is it 4 nines or is it 3 nines? It's like, come on that front. But your point is exactly well, kind of taken from the standpoint. Again, when we asked folks, what are your biggest challenges? Right, 24% said security. Right. Another 16% said, interruptions from troubleshooting because they hadn't worked out that operational motion around, kind of Kubernetes. So what we have is, and again, when we think I'm being old guy, right? Jeffrey Moore and the adoption curve and, kind of crossing the chasm and all those things. We're still very much in an early market, from a lot of, kind of Kubernetes adoption standpoint. The early adopters, the folks that can throw people at it, throw skills at it, kind of have things that they cook themselves and build it up. That's who is, kind of running significant, Kubernetes infrastructure now. You've got the late majority, right? And then the laggards. I mean, it's probably going to be a little while before they get there, and not until they get a lot of those capabilities, right? The guardrails you mentioned, the automation, kind of the making it kind of accessible to normal people. Right. As opposed to, these PhDs that can go and just, jump into the source code and make changes as they need to.
Well, and Kubernetes, back to the security part, it's not secure by default. Like, it does have some stuff that, provides some security layers, but, you don't want to configure something wrong or, run a container as root or do something that just seems like, okay, spin it up, go with the defaults. And suddenly you can, there's risk involved. And that's what needs to happen. And the troubleshooting comment you mentioned too, there are teams that are just platform engineering teams who are just auditing Kubernetes, and that's how they're spending their time. And if they could automate that to make sure that things are just happening before anything reaches production, that's going to save them time, and they're going to be able to do more innovative things, and everyone's happier.
Yeah, that's right. And kind of the state of where we are never is more apparent than when you ask folks how much time they spend auditing stuff, because that's a level of maturity, right? I mean, when you've got your processes and the internal auditors are there, and then, then you've got that's a thing. We've operationalized that technology. So we actually did ask that, right? And, 31% said they don't know. So,
well,
pretty indicative. I don't know. Are we on? No.
Well, and the people who said, that they were spending 4 to 5 days a month auditing it. We had one company, a customer of Insights, or Fairwinds Insights, where they were able to reduce the amount of time they were auditing by 1 to 2 weeks every time they wanted to deploy some code. And that's a lot of time that an organization spending auditing. And it's like, where can that time be better spent? And where can that resource be better spent so that you can stay on track to be innovative?
And the auditing is obviously what's up and running, and that, also think about kind of the onboarding, and we want to start increasing the velocity of applications that are rehomed, refactored, migrated over to Kubernetes. And again, that's kind of the hard thing, because you talk to some of these customers and they go, yeah, we did about 10 last year, right? And this is a big environment, right? We did 10 and, that's great. So what do you plan to do this year? 200. You're like, what? Okay, how are you going to do that, right? And that's when they go, well, don't know, or then they're like, well, we got to start investing in automation. We've got platform engineering spinning up. We're looking at tool sets that are going to help us, really reduce the drag, both from a posture standpoint, so we understand what we're deploying, and then an auditing and a kind of policy compliance standpoint as we're operating these environments. So that's kind of where folks really want to do this, right? They really want to get and expand their use of the capabilities, but right, they don't have that surrounding stuff around quite yet. So what are a couple of things that folks should look at, Danielle, when they really want to start scaling up their Kubernetes environments? What are things that you think that you're just not going to get there if you don't have kind of this stuff in place?
Well, you absolutely need to be running Kubernetes best practices. And, a lot of organizations don't know what those are. So you need to look at tools, and there's open source tools available like Polaris that Fairwinds provides that provide you with a list of, hey, these are the best practices. Are you checking for this configuration, that? Do you have limits? Do you have CPU set? Do you have these security configuration set? So you need to be doing that. But you need to be doing that early in the process. So it should be involved in your development lifecycle. You should be checking every stage of, going from, coding to when you're going to staging. Before you get production, these things should be part of your process. One of the big things that we're looking at now, and it's especially topical given the markets, is what about your cost? So inevitably, a developer wants to use Kubernetes. They're building their platform. They're not setting limits to, their memory or CPU usage. They're just letting it go wide open. So as you scale, that could be a huge cloud bill. So you have the challenge of, I need to make sure I set the right limit so that I don't have outages in my application. And I need to set it so that I'm not wasting resource. And I think as in this market in 2023, as organizations are looking at their cloud spend and how they can reduce it, Kubernetes is a black hole, and it can't be anymore. People need visibility into this.
Yeah. And just to wrap up, kind of the questions that we did ask, right? We actually kind of thought about that, right? So as your Kubernetes environment grows, your costs question mark, right? 26% say staying within the planned budget, right? 18% increase beyond budget, 9% nearly out of control, right?
That is not good.
And 34% say don't know, right? So that gets right to the heart of the point that you just made. We can't build this into an enterprise utility, right? Something that can take and platform hundreds of applications over the next couple of years if we don't have the visibility, right? If we don't have the security, we don't have these processes operationalized to the point where, we know predictably what's going to happen. We don't have enough people. We certainly don't have enough resources. We're in an environment where funding is not kind of falling off trees like it used to for all the projects that were there. So again, in 2023, it's really about scale. It's about operationalizing. And if you don't have tools, if you don't have a lot of the, kind of visibility, I think it's going to be really hard. And I would guess you would agree with that.
Absolutely. I mean, your finance team is going to be knocking on the door going, why does your cloud bill look like this? What's happening? And instead, if you can be proactive and say, hey, look at what I'm doing for our cloud bill, look at how I'm monitoring it based on our usage of Kubernetes, and look at how I'm right sizing it to make sure that we are not wasting resource, you're going to be the finance team's hero.
That's right. And that's what we all want to, at the end of the day, all we want to be is the hero. Who could I be the hero for? And most days it's no one. But, that's a different issue that we have to deal with. So, Danielle Cook, thank you so much for being on the show. It's always a great time. Thank you for supporting the Pulse Meter. So the Pulse Meter is a paper we will have out, infographic that we'll have in the next week or so. You'll be able to get that on the Techstrong site. I know you'll be able to get it from Fairwinds as well. You'll run some campaigns around that, I would assume. So how do folks find you guys, if they're interested in what you can do to help,
So you can go to fairwinds.com. We do have Fairwinds Insights that does the Kubernetes governance platform that really is a paved road to getting your applications to production with security, checking security off, checking off the cost, and providing those guardrails so that your developers are able to ship those applications faster and your platform engineers can save themselves some time, and stop being a help desk.
Exactly. Stop being a help desk. So with that, thanks again, Danielle. Great to see you. And now we will send it back to the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Well, welcome back. We are still at it here at AWS reInvent, talking with some great people. We have some fantastic interviews already, and we have more lined up. I'm very pleased to be joined by Krishna Mohan, who is Global Head of AWS Business Unit with Tata. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
You are holding up very well. You look like you're doing pretty good at the show here. That's kind of day 3, and I'm usually worn down by this point pretty well. But before we get started, and we have some great things to talk about, I'd love to have you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Tata.
Thank you again. I'm Krishna Mohan. I'm responsible for running AWS Business Unit within TCS, Tata Consultancy Services. We're the top IT consulting and service provider. We are around 600,000 people globally, operating across the globe. And the unit that I head is AWS Business Unit. We are around 45,000 people strong, and we serve around 500 plus customers on cloud transformation. Anything that happens on AWS and associated ecosystem is the responsibility of my unit.
Very cool. Well, that kind of puts a scale on it. I mean, we have, about 45, 50,000 people at the show, so you have as many people in your organization as at the show. That's pretty big. That's really big, actually. Well, thanks for joining us. Love to get your perspective on a couple things. What are your thoughts on the keynotes? Because obviously AWS is trying to send some directional messages as well as get the word out about things that are happening. What have you picked up on so far?
I had the opportunity to attend, the main keynote by Adam. So that's actually the one which I could, and the remaining one I saw a few great keynotes, but summary. But if I had to reflect on Adam's keynote, I think I like the balance of the way I summarize it. There are some offerings. There were already existing offerings, but they've actually made it more comprehensive from a coverage perspective, like data, like security lake, like contact center, connect and completely, incorporating workforce management and agent experience and all of that. So that's one set of the things I'm pretty happy to see. And I loved the way that Adam actually spoke about data as the main one. So infrastructure is key, and they continue to innovate at even at the infrastructure layer. But to start off with the data, which is really where the business value is, kind of shows the direction that AWS is taking. And I can't be more than happy, because as what we see from a customers is that's where you can differentiate. Then I loved the focus on the second set, if you look at it, is on business value side. AWS supply chain or Amazon supply chain offering is really good. healthcare cloud. We learned about it, what they're actually doing, then walk out. So the way I see it is all what is Amazon known for, the differentiators, the bigger company, and those differentiators are being brought as an offerings. So that's the path that I actually see. That's my takeaway. Initial reactions, we need to see what's under the hood. But normally if AWS has gone on any offering, there is a roadmap, they think ahead and they're very diligent in following it up and scaling it up. So that's the two things that I actually see.
I definitely agree with your perspective on that. We've talked to a number of folks about data, technology suppliers, customers. And data is a consistent theme, right? And I think some of it is sort of data sprawl, governance, access control, business value from it, analytics, sort of across the spectrum, right? And I think your point about business value is spot on. Clearly, Amazon is continuing to want to push deeper and deeper into the enterprise. They've done well with tech, but and they have lots of great tech offerings and new things coming. But it isn't just about tech, right?
Yeah.
It's end of the day, it's the results, right? It's the value that creation
it's the outcome,
that happens.
absolutely.
It's the outcome, precisely. Very good. Well, tell me a little bit. I'd love to kind of connect the dots. You don't have to tell me what all 45,000 people are working on, but what's Tata's part in this ecosystem with Amazon?
Yeah. I think, see, as I said, the overall TCS, we have been in business for 6 decades in the IT consulting services and transformation. And we basically looked at, the AWS business unit is formed 2 years back. Not that we were not in the cloud, so we've been in the cloud and working with AWS for the last a decade or so. But we actually felt that the cloud is becoming IT, if you will. It's bringing all the components of IT, applications, data, infrastructure, even OT to an extent. So we formed a full stack unit. That means anything that actually happens on the cloud at a full stack at all the layers is what we actually deliver. So that's what AWS business unit is. But the value of my unit is to work with the customers across all the industries and then kind of deliver the outcomes for them. That's where I kind of bring in what we believe cloud where it is going, is cloud 2.0, we want to call it. Initial lot of adoption of cloud is more on future-proofing the technology. That means you modernizing it, going cloud native, looking at architecture that is more fungible with microservices, APIfication, and taking the models from fixed cost to variable cost. But I think what we see in the last 1 year or so, especially post-COVID, is definitely maturing to future-proofing businesses. That's the role of the cloud that we actually see. What do I mean by that? A cloud is playing a very core innovator role in building new business models, improving the customer experience, coming out with some new revenue channels, leveraging the data that is actually what is already there, and applying machine learning to bring out the business value. So these are the things that what we actually see more and more happening. And that's where the cloud role has evolved. And that's exactly where our unit is actually working. TCS is designed, is organized as industry verticals. We probably for more than a decade, one of the first organization to align ourselves into industry verticals. Because how much our technology is there, the real value of technology is how you can deliver value to a bank. How can you deliver a value to improving an agent experience in an insurance? How can you help accelerate the drug development using technology, right? And how can you improve an experience of a customer in an airline, whether from reservation to gate performance to maintenance? So these are the things that were more important, and we are aligned vertically, and we are focused on a few of the verticals with AWS. We have go big plans and delivering those results. So.
Boy, I'm having kind of flashbacks. I started my career with EDS, and I worked on one of the first partnerships with Tata. This is back in the 80s, showing my age here. But it's amazing. You talk about Tata being here for 60 plus years. It's interesting. I get your point about there's sort of the technical and financial and logistical things that the cloud brings. And we've been through this digital transformation, COVID, so changing some of our business models and reacting to that situation. But I'm listening to what you're talking about. Seems a lot of it falls into, I need agility. I need the ability to do new things faster. And now that I don't have to rely on just my own infrastructure, I may still have that too. Right? I've got my own data centers. Big enterprises aren't all putting those in mothballs. They're very much part of the strategy. But companies don't always want to go it there alone. They don't want to learn those lessons the hard way. Sometimes you need to. You kind of got to learn it. At least it's sort of that teenager. You got to learn it the hard way. But you really want a trusted partner. Like, help me with the strategy, help me with the process, help me with making the right decisions. So what I put there and the way I do it are done based on some skill and some experience that I can benefit from. And not that I'm doing a commercial for Tata, but that to me is one of the key roles.
No, it's a key role. What we have done specifically within AWS business unit is we kind of took all the delivery wisdom of 1,200 plus projects that we're doing, and various projects. The cloud adoption is at a different stages for different customers. There are a few folks who are deciding what to do. There are a few folks who are actively involved in migrating and modernizing. There are a lot of customers, select customers, who are actually have moved already, now really trying to exploit the real value of cloud native and the value out of it. So what we have done is we have actually built platforms. The way that how we support is two. One is skills, the talent. So 45,000, lot of certifications, AWS, lot of competencies that we have, global presence. So that's the people aspect of it, skills aspect of it. And the cloud skills are different, right? I do not have a server, a network guy, or a database guy, or an application guy. I have a cloud solution architect. I have a cloud engineer.
Blended now.
That's all blended, right? Automation is part of it. So that's one aspect of it. When we say the number, they are not just trained and certified on AWS. They are core cloud native folks, right? That's one aspect of it where we actually add value, and it is required. I was talking to a recent global CIO of a financial services company, and you need somebody to think native, the new way of doing things. Mm-hmm. As much as cloud adoption is a culture as well. Mm-hmm. And the way that we worked out is in that meeting, we actually had only a 4-year experienced person who only knows how it is supposed to work on cloud. It's an absolutely cloud native person. That person has never seen our legacy. We have been for decades. We know what happened in mainframes, we know what happened in all the constraints that will come up. So we needed somebody who only think about the new way of doing things into the mix when you're solving the problem. And that becomes a champion of questioning what's the right way of doing it in the things. So I think that native knowledge of cloud, the futuristic way, is really required along with the experience. So our ability to bring in both how to manage and migrate legacy, as well as the cloud native capabilities of how future should be, is what customers appreciate us for bringing in the value.
It's part of that evolution. It's not just doing the things we've been doing in a new environment. It's also understanding
the new
what are
way
the different ways and new ways of doing that, and what do we blend, what do we do new, how do we do that?
And then the second thing is also about all our, the delivery wisdom, if you will, of what we have learned. We have actually embedded them into platforms. So talent is the first part, but build the platforms that are ML driven for the entire life cycle of the cloud. Consulting, decision making, analysis, which workload has to go where, foundation, migration, modernization, and operations. So all of this is actually digitized in a platforms that TCS has built. And when customers look at it, it's a continuous platform that's improving, capturing all the, the real lessons learned embedded into it. And AWS is rolling out capabilities, eternally, right? The pace of innovation at AWS is just incredible.
It's hard enough to keep up with that.
Yeah, so
do what we need to do on our own.
So it becomes, how do I take that and embed into my platform so that when somebody wants to adapt, immediately you can look at it. It's not only beyond well-architectured review of AWS, but it's about all the experiences that we are getting from other customers also is embedded there. Yeah.
Very good. Well, Krishna, it's been fantastic talking with you. Glad to have you out on the floor and in some of the keynotes, bringing us some of that intelligence back onto Techstrong TV. So I hope you'll keep in touch, and thanks for sharing it with us.
Thank you for having me.
To find out more about your services, where can folks go? What website or?
Yeah, they can actually go to tcs.com. You type cloud and AWS Cloud comes out first, and we have a great partnership and great value to offer. And again, thank you for opportunity. It's great talking to you.
Absolutely. Great. Another great guest here with us on Techstrong TV. So hang in there. It's been a pleasure being part of AWS reInvent with you, and we have just a number of great videos to share with you. So hang tight.
This is Techstrong TV.
I'm Bonnie Schneider for Techstrong TV, and joining me now is Rick Van Zura, who is the CEO of Freight Farms. And Rick, I'm so glad that you're joining me today. Can you tell me a little bit about Freight Farms, what it is, and how you get started?
Sure. So Freight Farms started the journey started in 2010, where our co-founders, John Friedman and Brad McNamara, wanted to address food deserts here in Boston. They started with the concept of doing it with rooftop gardens and realized pretty quickly that wasn't scalable. And so sometime around 2012, wandering around, they saw all of these shipping containers that were just sitting unused. And I think it was really John who got this aha moment that, geez, you could put LED lights and some airflow inside those containers and grow plants. And that would be a good way to address urban food deserts. So based on that initial idea, we've now raised $45 million in VC funding through several rounds. We've gone through 10 different iterations of the farm, where we've now gone from using used shipping containers to totally custom built new containers. And we're at the point now where through those standard 8 by 40 foot shipping containers, using our software and our consumables, you can grow about 2.5 acres worth of produce in that footprint. And you can do it in temperatures ranging from -40 to plus 120 degrees Fahrenheit, with a constant climate managed by the software 365 days a year. So you can be growing very precise plants any time of the year, totally consistently, hyper-local, sustainable, with minimal land, minimal water, and minimal transportation miles. So based on that, we've now grown to where we're in just about every U.S. state in 40 countries. And now we are able to share the collective experience of all those farmers to keep making the solutions better and better.
That's really an interesting journey that you've been on. Can you explain for people that aren't familiar with modular farming, kind of taking a step back, and what is it? How does it work?
Sure. So again, we use the same shipping container size that you would see if you watched train roll by with a bunch of shipping containers on it, or you saw a large cargo ship. So in that standard 8 by 40 foot container, we've now developed a lot of proprietary technology that provides for controlled airflow, controlled climate, controlled nutrients. It's a hydroponic environment where just through recirculating water and then LED lights that provide the lighting, which really supports the plant growth, you're able to go from seedling all the way through cultivating generally lettuces, leafy greens, microgreens, small intercropping root vegetables, and you're able to grow those very productively through vertical towers that are in the shipping container. So the advantage of doing it in these vertical towers is you can be very dense with your production, and also by having the standard shipping container size, you can place these anywhere where you can find a 10 by 50 foot piece of land, and you can transport it on anything which can transport these shipping containers, which is standard trucking vehicles. They are standard to go on ships. So it really allows you to put this farm anywhere in the world where you can find a 10 by 50 foot plot of land where you have access to water and power.
That is really fascinating. You mentioned the software that's involved. Can we take a deeper dive into that and maybe explain how that works and what are the processes that go into that in terms of turning out this modular farming unit where you're producing all these different types of greens, as you mentioned?
Sure. So the software has actually had as much work go into it as the hardware. And what it allows you to do is through the software, you can control the lighting in the farm, environmental conditions like temperature and humidity and nutrient delivery. So through the experience of now thousands of farmer years, we've developed ideal recipes for different plants. And the software allows you to just set it to a specific recipe, and then the software will manage all of the variables of when the lights are turned on and off, how nutrients get delivered, the climatic conditions to manage that plant growth. And then it also has a number of other features like task tracking, specific control of specific variables if you want to deviate from the recipe, different permission settings so you can manage who's able to do what in the farm at any given time. And then there's a bunch of online training materials and different resources to help you with different types of plants you want to grow. So the software really takes just about all of the guesswork of the farm out of it.
So who are your clients? What would you say are the type of people that are interested in doing something like this?
Yep. So historically, it's really split between small business and small business farmers, which are husband and wife, two-person team. That would be the kind of folks who might be interested in a Subway franchise where they just want sort of a solid income, something where a lot of the guesswork, again, is taken out from them and that feeling of ownership over what they do, but also feel a deep sense of mission that we have, democratizing access to food and sustainability. And their journey generally starts with buying one farm and then growing to 3, because you can manage that comfortably with 2 people and have a very nice income. And that's about 70% of our customers historically. And then about 30% are not-for-profit. We have more commercial farms in academia than anyone in the world. We're in dozens of colleges and universities, and they use us from direct integration into their agricultural program to research to supplying the cafeterias with fresh food to just driving donor and student engagement. And then we have community-based organizations like Boys and Girls Clubs that use us to engage a specific population, have STEM training, be able to distribute food into the community. What's now shifting is as our solutions gotten more advanced, yields have gotten better, the range of crops has expanded. And we've also had these global issues with supply chain disruptions and having a constant source of supply. We've seen a lot more institutional interest and a lot more interest in larger scale farm projects over the last year. So we think that'll be a larger and larger piece of what we do.
It's interesting you mentioned the supply chain disruptions, because that's one of the hazards that we face with the food supply that we've certainly seen recently. But you also have the issue of climate change itself and how we're getting more and more extreme weather events. They are hitting places where they didn't normally. some of these events are more extreme in terms of the frequency and intensity and duration. So that's disruptive as well. How do these modular units for freight farms battle that? I mean, is everything completely contained where the weather and the conditions outside just don't affect it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the major value propositions and a big part of why we came into being. Within each of these containers is everything you need to do, need to control to be able to grow produce. Again, if you have access to fairly minimal water and power, you can be growing 2.5 acres out of that individual farm. So it allows you to take any of the issues around long transportation chains out of it. You're producing right at the point of consumption. So if there's any travel disruptions or anything else, along with all of the other environmental impacts, et cetera, with travel, you take that out of it. But also, these are obviously very durable, sturdy containers. So, and highly climate controlled. So you can deal with extreme climates. As I mentioned, -40 to plus 120 degrees Fahrenheit. You can be operating with a constant climate inside. But also in tough conditions, whether it's hurricanes or other strong environmental forces, these are very sturdy containers that are meant to withstand the elements. So it takes a lot of those issues out of play, and it provides that hyper-local, secure source of food.
When you're putting this all together and developing the technology for it, did you have any challenges that you had to work around?
Yeah. So. A number of challenges that we've dealt with over time with the early technology that dealt with used storage containers, which there's still a number in the industry who use that model. We realized in 2019 that we had sort of pushed the limits of that technology, and it just wasn't as productive as it needed to be in terms of plant yields. And it wasn't as consistent and repeatable as we wanted it to be, because no two containers were exactly alike, because they were repurposed, they were used. So that's where we made the transition to our current line, the greenery line, where we went to purpose-built new containers, which included a lot of proprietary technology to allow for driving up yields and the range of plants we can grow. The other issue is just, the ease of use with the farm over time, where when a lot of that recipe work wasn't included in the software, there was a lot more guesswork around how to set the variables for the farm, how you would grow inside the farm. So again, over time, we've learned from that, and we've learned from the collective experience of farmers on what is an optimal recipe, and we found a way to program it that. And we've also dealt with our own consumables line and optimizing that to continue to improve it. The final thing is energy use. We are extremely sustainable in terms of land conservation, soil conservation, water conservation, eliminating transportation miles. So energy for the whole industry has been a real focal point because it does take power for the LEDs. So we've done a lot of work on improving the energy efficiency of the farms. There's been a lot of industry-wide progress, particularly in very efficient LED lights, and also a lot of focus on renewable energy, where in the US we have an agreement with Arcadia, where they partnership where they can provide clean energy to any farmer in the US to solve for some of the environmental impacts. And we continue to work with renewable sources to make that more efficient. So essentially, every aspect of the farm can continue to get better, has gotten a lot better. And so we're focusing on every aspect of the solution.
That's great, and it is a very important solution to the issue of climate technology that can actually make a difference, because as you mentioned, we've seen what happens when the food supply gets disrupted. It's going forward, when we're looking towards the future for freight farms, what is the technology that you would like to see be implemented that might help you expand this even further?
Yeah, well, we continue to focus on all aspects of what we do, continued technological advancements in the farm, whether it's airflow, HVAC capacity. We continue to work on consumables, software capability, et cetera. And we'll work on different configurations and form factors for the farm to meet different end uses. So there's a lot we can control. I would say from a broad perspective, I really hope that not only our industry, but the world continues to put a huge focus on renewable energy, because by definition, in the long run, renewables got to be a lot less expensive and more plentiful than non-renewable. And, one of my favorite quotes that I share all the time, it's a Native American proverb that's, we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And I feel like we've accumulated a massive debt with climate change. And, there was recently the announcement that the ozone layer is now virtually fixed, because that's a good example of where a human-made problem, we actually came up with an effective human-made solution for it by eliminating CFCs. So in that same way, I hope all of us really focus on renewables, because that will, as we've seen with the issues associated with the Ukraine war and a number of other things, being able to eliminate our reliance on fossil fuels in the long run will be to all of our benefit, including, obviously, our technology.
Thank you so much, Rick Van Zora from Freight Farms. It was a pleasure to speak with you and learn about your innovations that you're working on, and see more of modular farming as we move forward into the future. Thank you so much, Rick. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
All right. Well, stay with us. We're going to have a lot more when we come back.
Good morning, panel, and good morning, audience. So today's panel is Prove Me Wrong. DevOps is everywhere. DevOps and there. So I don't know if the screen is the same as my screen, but on the top right corner for me, I have a friend of mine from the security world for probably longer than either of us want to admit to. He's the founder of Tenable. He's also the founder and guiding light of, along with his wife, of Guler Tech Ventures, Ron Guler. Hey, Ron, welcome.
Hey, good morning, Alan. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely pleasure to have you on. Next to Ron, or between Ron and I on my screen, is my good friend Thomas Crane of Insight Partners, joining us. I'm going to say from that background, he's in Brooklyn today.
That's correct.
I'm not 100% sure. Hey, Thomas, welcome.
Hey, Alan. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here. As always, Thomas, your views are always, part of a great panel here. We have one newcomer on today's panel, and it's the first time she's joining us. I want to introduce you, and I hope I pronounced her name right, Suman Natarajan. She's from B Capital Group. She's the principal of B Capital Group. Suman, welcome.
Great to be here, Alan. Excited.
Thank you. And if I mispronounced your name, I apologize. And then last but certainly not least, one of my good friends in the security space, he always brings it to, whether he's talking by himself or part of a panel, his views are always interesting, tells it like it is, and he has a really great view of the market. My friend Julian Waits.
Happy to be here,
Julian,
Alan.
happy to have you here, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, so let's start it up. I want to hit this straight on because I actually got 2 inquiries from other media companies this week about what's going on with this DevOps is dead thing, right? Someone had written a sponsored article on our friend Alex Williams' Newsstack site. I responded to it. A bunch of other people responded to it. I'm wondering, Thomas, you probably have more DevOps invested than anyone here. What do you think? And let's kick it off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, look, I mean, we've got a number of investments that touch the sort of software development lifecycle with an emphasis on, developer tooling. And I mean, you can't really deny the secular factors that are driving, growth across all of these companies. I would say at the same time, they're not immune to the macroeconomic challenges that are facing many companies. And if anything, they probably have slightly more exposure to, the software vertical as an end market, which just can create a little bit of short-term shakiness. But I don't think, long-term, the growth in the developer community, growth in complexity and heterogeneity of tooling, I mean, it's just going to create secular tailwinds for the category. Whether you call it DevOps, maybe there's a debate there. And, I feel as representing the investment team of Insight, and we talk to a lot of companies, there's kind of a new trend or new kids on the block. There's the internal development platforms, the IDPs. There's sort of just a number of different, we see these ephemeral environments as a service. We see sort of this reversion back to past. I mean, again, it's kind of just new flavors of the same sort of technology that we've been looking at and talking about for a long time now. And so maybe you call it something different, you call it IDP. At its core, it's still, the same trends that are driving it, which is developers needing more tools in their toolkit to do more sophisticated operations around modern infrastructure.
Fair. Anybody on our panel want to jump in there?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that's happening right now is that a lot of organizations are finding out that the cloud is very expensive. And when they start looking at those Amazon bills and those Google bills, they're starting to think about, well, hey, maybe we just can't code and throw code where we want. We have to be a little bit more strategic about what is our business, how do we control costs. And I think that kind of can have a negative impact on, DevOps being a cost center and not a profit center.
I don't disagree. Julian, you and I have been through a few cycles, as has Ron, frankly. And you know what? When money gets tight, people start looking where it's getting spent. And we've seen it. Julian, interested in your view.
Ron, I'm sorry, Alan. Things work in a cycle, right? Whether we call it IDP or DevOps, it's really more about automation. And to Ron's point, when I look at the workloads that I'm creating in the environment, where's it most cost effective to have those work? But at the end of the day, automation is the key. And DevOps is certainly not dead. It's become a core component of software development. So it's more of something that's kind of left behind in the thought process, but it's never going to die. It'll just get one iteration or another one in terms of its life cycle. But software development is a complex thing. Cloud workloads make it much more complex. And I think the whole concept of DevOps being dead is just silly.
I don't disagree. Look, to paraphrase an old general, old technologies never die. Right? They kind of fade away. But here's an interesting thing that I see with DevOps is that the mission to keep on this military kind of thing. The mission of DevOps has grown so much, right? When I first started DevOps.com, it was dev and ops, dev and ops. How does dev and ops work together? 5, 6 years ago, security became a huge part of it. It's DevSecOps. Julian, you and I have spoken about it. Ron and Thomas, we've all spoken about it. But Suman, I mean, this is an area where you play as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've invested in a number of DevOps and DevSecOps companies across, both Intel Capital, City Ventures, and now at B Capital. I think the notion of DevOps is dead is supposed to be provocative to kind of encourage conversations like this, but out in the real world, I think the thing that a comment like that ignores is that people are still just starting their journey with DevOps. It's a broad continuum. Many organizations are kind of at different stages. And so to kind of only talk about maybe a tip of the spear experience and, within our maybe VC bubble, we like to fixate on some of those spots a little bit more, is kind of not maybe seeing kind of the full picture of the ecosystem at large. But I mean, DevOps is all about, supporting velocity and supporting reliability and trying to find, technology approaches, process approaches, collaboration approaches that facilitate that. And just how people are working together, the technologies that are available, I think continue to change. And I think as Thomas and Ron have spotted, from a resourcing perspective, given the macro, some of the, we might want to lean more on technology, given that current challenge. But it's certainly not, it's not dead.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on then. Ron, you framed it really well, right? And this was a problem we used to have in security too. Is DevOps a cost center, or is it does it make us more efficient and actually save money? Right? So does it generate money or it costs us money?
Yeah, DevOps certainly enables a lot of cost savings. And, I'm trying to put myself in somebody who's in the audience watching this, who's maybe a brand new developer trying to figure out the lay of the land. If I describe DevOps as taking, 95% of IP, written by somebody else, right? Whether it's open source code or, Amazon's microservices or whatnot, you could see DevOps as basically saying, I'm going to take the little bit of code I'm writing and getting maximum, value out of that. There's security benefits to using other people's code, especially if it's been tested in infrastructure. So you don't need to go out and buy as much security stuff as you would think the cyber industry, wants to invest in them. But at the end of the day, I think if you look at other industries like automotive, IoT devices that if for manufacturing and whatnot, we're starting to get into this phase where people are expecting new features to kind of come for free, in things that they buy, and sometimes that's a little frightening because if you're flying anywhere, you really don't want to hear on takeoff the pilot saying, hey, we just upgraded the wings last night, and if it goes well, the whole fleet's going to get them, right? But if it doesn't, we're going to roll back real quick. The DevOps is one of the only industries where you can constantly get value out of that. But some customers and industries are very much, hey, my features are good. I don't need new features. I want it the way it was before. So you're gonna have this constant tug back and forth.
Agreed. So, Thomas, I'm going to throw the same kind of thing at you, but I want to just add in, given macroeconomic conditions, we'll use the sanitized word, macroeconomic conditions. Guys, we're headed for a recession. Potentially, pretty likely here. What does this mean for your investment outlook, Thomas? What does it mean not only for your present portfolio companies, but for investments you're looking at?
Yeah, look, Alan, I mean, there's a lot of doom and gloom out there, but again, you look at penetration of cloud workloads relative to on-premise IT, you look at growth in number of developers and just a lot of the underlying trends that I think fuel sort of the long-term growth of the software sector. And certainly things are only getting more and more complex. And as Ron pointed out, yeah, I mean, folks are starting to realize that their cloud bills are a little bit out of control. But what does that mean? It means a push toward hybrid infrastructure, and that means more complexity, and that creates an opportunity for emerging technologies to help navigate that opportunity. I mean, you look at how the introduction of DevOps and really the ubiquity of its adoption has created new market opportunities. Look at microservices architectures and the criticality of APIs to, as a building block of any application. And what that means from a cybersecurity perspective is we see more API breaches happening, and no name security being one of the highest growth, companies in our portfolio. You see those kinds of opportunities being created. Of course, also as Ron mentioned, new component, software development just being cobbling together existing third-party components. Well, that software supply chain creates a lot of downstream risk if it's not, and a lot of interdependency, as we saw with some of these recent software vulnerabilities. That creates, again, more opportunities. So look, I mean, there's going to be some short-term, I think, choppiness in terms of performance, but with the long-term macro very much in our favor, maybe hold periods get extended by a year or two. Could be a compression on IRR, but fundamentally, I don't see a massive reduction in terms of performance or a retreading in terms of adoption. In fact, I only see more new companies getting started this year than ever before.
Absolutely. You know what? It's always been my experience that in choppy economic times, tomorrow's great companies are founded. Ron, when you started Tenable, I started Bill Secure, it was like 2001, 2002, right? We were just coming out of the dot-com bubble. Think about all the great companies that were founded in that period of time, again in 2007 and 2008. So,
Yeah, I think there's definitely companies being created now that could be iconic companies of the future. And we've had a lot of great companies in cyber for the last, 10 years or so, but they've been, as to Tom's point, the complexities kind of increase. So these products become very niche, database, activity monitoring for example, you need it, but it's not hugely, strategic like a Cisco or a Checkpoint. I also think that if we hopefully have, a peaceful conclusion to the war in Ukraine, you're actually going to see a lot of cyber talent and cyber companies, including in this DevOps, SecDevOps, space, come out of Ukraine.
Amen to that. We all want peace, I think, as quickly as possible there for more than just even cybersecurity, but that certainly will help. Speaking of cyber, though, one of the things that's done my heart good over these years is to see how security has really integrated and latched on to this whole DevOps movement. Thomas, you spoke about software supply chain. You can't say software supply chain without attaching security to the end, and SBOMs and all of this stuff. It's really, security is mainstream. Security is top priority. Don't dig around. Julian, you've got a bunch of years here in this industry. What do you think about that?
Well, again, to your point, Alan, and I think the point that everyone's making, the scale at which we're needing to build software is driving the need for more and more security and more automation. I mean, it's unfortunate, but even in this day and age, most developers don't understand security. Not that they don't want to have security, they just don't understand it. And so more and more tools have to be built to support it. One counter to what Ron said earlier, because I'm a Tesla owner, I actually love when I get new updates. But just think what it takes to support the development process between Tesla's cloud to the CPUs and the storage that run in my car. And now magnify that towards thousands of cars. And God forbid if somebody found a way to get in that pipeline and all of a sudden the car turns off a cliff or the brakes don't work. So, the one question you have to ask yourself is, are we going to have more and more code written every day? Are there going to be more developers coming into the market every day? And certainly as CPUs continue to move forward and cloud workloads become more efficient, again, having a concept like DevOps to me is it's more of a process than a thing. It's just a component of the way you do things.
I absolutely agree. Suman, what from where you sit though, I mean, security is really just in the fabric now, isn't it?
I mean, that's the hope. I think it's still evolving more into kind of being embedded within the SDLC more so. I've previously invested in companies like Sneak and Styra that I think were doing a great job of trying to, one, embrace kind of the developer experience, and then two, kind of leverage the new reality of the SDLC toolchain and cloud native infrastructure. So it is moving in that direction, but I think the kind of load and kind of shift left kind of process, I think is part of maybe one of the reasons why this notion of DevOps is dead and let's move to platform engineering idea is arising as well, in that it's really putting a lot of burden and strain on the developers. To Julian's point, right? Developers don't know security, and I don't know if the expectation is for them to become security experts, but possibly it's just helping them embed security earlier in the process to ensure greater reliability, more downstream. So I think it is still evolving, but we're not quite there yet. It's the hope would be to have it fully embedded, and that's the opportunity.
Absolutely. So shift left is the topic of another discussion we've had. Have we gone too far left? Do we need shift right? There's various parts of it. But I want to stick on DevOps for this panel. And, you mentioned Styra, for instance, right? They're the people behind OPA, Open Source Policy Agent, but they're clearly in the cloud native space. I'm actually doing a live roundtable later this afternoon. Can you have cloud native without DevOps? And when we talk about DevOps everywhere, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. DevOps is so embedded in the way we're doing things. A lot of people, moving over to Kubernetes stacks, this whole new stack, cloud native stack. Can you do that without DevOps, though? Anybody on the team can jump in, and then I'm interested in everyone's kind of thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can comment on that. So when you talk about data in the cloud, in the U.S., we tend to view data from a regulatory point of view. Is it PII? Is it subject to PCI? Is it GDPR and whatnot? But we sort of don't have sort of the safety hat, caution, this is contaminated, radioactive, don't ever give this to anybody sort of mentality when it comes to data. And unlike, countries like Estonia, which have one-use data retention policies and policies of you want to code against this data, when are you going to get it? Who's going to get it? There's authorization that goes with access. We just don't have that mentality here in the States. We tend to focus more on, is the code secure? Is it resilient? Is it, is it delivering the features people want? And until we have that change, that data is the resource that drives things, we're not going to, I think, ever really get away from managing that stuff.
I feel like we need a sign that says it's all about the data. But you're right. Here's the good news. So I've been seeing a lot of companies that are involved in data ops, data security. Thomas, look, you probably see as many companies as anyone, Thomas. What are you seeing around data and data security?
I mean, look, I think Ron makes some great points that this does kind of have to start top down, and there's from the perspective of regulation, we're sort of in that early phase where it is more of a compliance-driven sale and exercise in terms of the early adopters than it is security or the operational side of it. I mean, the same could be said of the vulnerability market. Back in the day, you kind of did it so you could check the box on PCI compliance, but now, you use Tenable to measure continuously your cyber exposure. And I think that's going to be true with data. We're still in that okay, let's make sure we get all of our cookie settings and user permissions set properly. But at some point, there actually has to be a reckoning around, how do we actually think about the security risk of the data and how we use it.
I agree. Julian, this is your area of expertise, one of your areas of expertise. I'm wondering what you think.
So I actually think people do think about data. What they don't think about is the care of the data. And I think that's where Ron was going, since we've actually had this discussion before. The big issue, right? It's, at Rapid7 or any other company I've worked for in the past, Devo and others in operational security, the issue still always focuses around security for what, or DevOps for what. Again, if you look at security as a process and you look at DevOps as a process, the way everything should be built is around the data that's most critical to your environment that you're trying to protect. But today we allow the infrastructure to drive how we care for our data versus the way it should be done. And until we think about it differently, we're going to continue to have all the security issues we have continually. But more importantly, right, what makes DevOps so important, and I think Thomas made a good point when he talked about hybrid environments, because I actually hate when people say cloud native. I think that's a great buzzword to use when you're trying to sell to a customer or something like that. But very few applications are fully cloud native. CI/CD pipelines and being able to secure the processes and the steps in between will always be critical to what we do. And it still comes back to, why are we doing it? And why are we doing it is to protect the data. But, to Suman's point, we're a long way away from being able to control all of that.
Can I just jump in? I mean, I think
absolutely go.
The inertia to on-prem has historically been, tech debt one, but also the data security question and regulation. I think there's going to be a push back toward on-prem, to Ron's point on, and I think Martin Casado at Andreessen has written about this, but this idea of actually, folks moving away from the public cloud because of the response to the cost side. And there's no proof that the cost equation of renting a workload is necessarily better long term than the capex equation. So again, and we're going back, the pendulum is swinging, right? And maybe it's a little, I'm trying to be a little bit provocative with it, but there maybe that's a sort of a headwind to the Microsoft Azure and AWS growth that has really been kind of unencumbered up until now.
Yeah. So let me frame, and for purposes of our panel, and I'll throw it to you, Suman. DevOps, on-premises, in cloud, in the edge, Internet of Things. It's all DevOps to me. DevOps still have a place there. Go ahead.
I totally agree. I think that as infrastructure continues to evolve, like the knowledge base and kind of optionality, continues to grow. And you need kind of a subject matter expert who can consume that and take advantage of that for like the needs and requirements of your organization and the applications that you're building and delivering. And so I think as a function, it's not going away. It's certainly evolving. And I think some folks have mentioned that in the comments as well. And then I think I really love the kind of conversation of moving to cloud and then moving back to on-prem. Again, I think that's like a very tip of the spear kind of experience for people to start a non-trivial process of migrating workloads and data off cloud onto prem. You're going to have kind of the similar data gravity inertia issues. We invested in a company that's actually helping on the cloud cost optimization side called Zesty. But the kind of hope there is that you can stay in the cloud and only pay for what you're actually using, just to kind of optimize that cloud bill. But the flexibility that public cloud offers is just so much greater, is vastly greater than what you can actually achieve on-prem. So I feel like while there might be this kind of pushback on cloud, I don't know if it will be sufficient enough to actually drive kind of that big change, unless you're a large tech hyperscaler SaaS organization where you need to kind of manage your workloads in a more efficient way. and you need that control. But that's kind of what I would say.
I would just like to add on that thing. I know if you don't want to use the word cloud native, don't use the word cloud native. But one of the nice things about Kubernetes-based architecture is you can run Kube on-premise, you can run it on bare metal, and in the cloud, and it truly represents sort of this distributed architecture that I think we've been in the market. We've been looking for something for 20 plus years that can browse true distribution of your applications, of your data, the distributed architecture.
Hey, Alan, if I could jump on that though.
Go.
So when you run, Kubernetes, on Linux in something like Equinox in one of your own data centers, you probably bought the hardware. There's a chance the hardware could have a backdoor or an implant on it and whatnot, but most likely it doesn't, right? You control the operating system, you control the code that goes on there. You probably can control the cryptography that goes in and out. As soon as you move that to a virtualized system in somebody else's cloud, they can take screenshots of your memory, basically. They can copy your hard drive images. And a lot of people who do incident response in the cloud, you actually have full native images of the not only the containers, but the VMs that are there. So this has really, halted a lot of banks from going all in with the cloud because they have to do multiple layers of cryptography and key control just to run a VM, securely from their point of view. So it's actually a lot more work for some people who care about security to go to the cloud versus on-prem.
But this has always been, Ron, that's always been the argument with the cloud, right? You're giving up control, not responsibility.
But if the customer requires it and it's the fastest way to get there, I mean, if I'm competing with Tesla, I know that the standard is I need to be able to update the software on my car fleet, and my customers expect that. And I may not be equipped to build that on my own or in my own existing infrastructure. And I have no choice but to go to the public cloud if I want to stay alive. So there is that aspect of just trying to keep up with the more innovative companies out there that have kind of necessitated that.
Yeah, I think Thomas raises a really good point because it's really a trade-off, across enterprises. Are you security led or are you velocity led? And I would add security and reliability led. And I think what you're optimizing for and the process that kind of backs that up is going to vary based on how you decide to make that trade-off. And so, to Thomas's point, if you are, a software company that needs to compete and needs to kind of get your software out there as quickly, as efficiently as possible, then you're going to embrace kind of different kind of architectures and then require security to adapt to that versus, organizations like banks and so forth. In my experience at Citi too, I totally understand the risks that they're taking in moving to cloud. But I think there are opportunities to kind of improve upon the security posture as well as they're making that migration. It kind of is a forcing function to kind of maybe rethink older standards and controls that they've maybe leaned on for years as well. So
I also think that the concept of digital transformation is an evolving concept, right? Meaning that, initially when we first started using it, it was the move to the cloud. But to kind of go back to some of the things we started on earlier, I think we're software development, and certainly in the security world, we're having to think about it from a reliability standpoint and availability. It's still optimizing whether workloads run best to optimize what it is the outcomes are that I'm trying to achieve. So I honestly believe there's going to be a lot more hybrid applications written moving forward, especially when you're looking at situations where I have no access to the cloud, but I still need to have availability to my workloads. I still need to have availability to many of the outcomes that I expect from the software. It's going to force it. And I think a lot of banks are looking at that now, Ron.
They are. We have a lot of experience with companies who have commercial offerings, containers for commercial customers, and the military, the U.S. military is asking them, hey, deploy your stuff on our cloud. And even with big contracts, a lot of commercial companies are like, look, we don't want to go through that. We can't make that investment to kind of re-architect this to do security. It's really, really rough. I mean, really classic example. There's no on-prem version of Slack, right? There's no on-prem version of Salesforce. It's absolutely not even something that you can buy, even if you throw all the money in the world at these companies. And you're going to find that as you look at all the different APIs out there and all the different types of middle layers for running cloud, there's different levels of what you can actually control to be secure, because sometimes security just wasn't the number one thing in these designs.
Fair enough. Hey guys, we've got a lot of questions from the audience, and I ask people to ask questions. I feel obligated to respond. One of the questions was, hey, Kubernetes has been kind of dominant as the orchestration layer of this or piece of this for a while now. Are we going to see something else? Is there another orchestration tool or something that allows us to maybe accomplish some of the things around security, around some of the other things we're talking about? Suman, you have your ear to the new stuff. I'm going to ask you to lead off, and then everyone else can follow up.
Yeah, I think technology-wise and architecture-wise, there probably are better orchestration layers out there. I think they've probably come and gone. I think what kind of makes Kubernetes dominant is just that it's the most popular, given even with all its faults, and the kind of architectures and standards that are able to get that kind of mind share. I think ultimately dominate. It's very hard to kind of compete on kind of small features. But I agree. I think the kind of opportunity to build on Kubernetes is pretty large. One, I think adopting it is non-trivial, and so there are a lot of companies that have emerged to help kind of manage Kubernetes more easily, both in the open source and as kind of commercial offerings. And then again, I think there's a lot of cyber companies that are also kind of recognizing, hey, this is the standard. Let's build to kind of work within the constraints of Kubernetes to offer more policies, more controls as well. So I don't think Kubernetes is going away. I think how we interact with Kubernetes might continue to change.
I would agree with that. I think it's going to continue to dominate, but there's ways to optimize around the edges. I think deployment is where there's a lot of innovation happening. Deployment management, deployment automation. The founder of Docker, inventor of it, Solomon Hykes, has a new company, Dagger. It's all about how do you rethink, almost like a containerization of deployment, for example, right? And we've seen certainly tremendous growth in companies like Harness and those that make the deployment side of in the kind of continuous deployment side of this easier. So, but I don't see Kubernetes going anywhere.
Yeah, and if you're selling into the federal government, Kubernetes is the standard. I mean, the DoD and now many civilian agencies are dictating if you're doing FedRAMP or if you're disastig into DoD GovCloud environments, you can't even get certified without Kubernetes now. So it's just the way things are. So if you're trying to sell in both environments, why would you have more than one orchestration technology?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see a lot of things that are going to disrupt how we do Kubernetes, regardless if you're hybrid cloud, all in on Google or whatnot. But I think the biggest thing that's going to affect the industry, if you can talk to an AI and say, draw me a picture of heaven and have this amazing picture of heaven given to you instantly, you're going to be able to go to an AI very soon and say, I want some code and some infrastructure that does this, and the AI is going to write it for you. And I think that's going to be more disruptive to our industry than anything else coming down the pipe right now.
Yeah, I scared the heck out of me. Especially even in my own business here. I mean, writers, they're using AI to just write articles, and it's getting harder and harder to tell whether a human wrote it or an AI wrote it. I saw an AI PR agency that pitches your stories automatically and so forth. you know what? Again, Thomas, with the amount of deal flow and companies you see running through you, how, where are we with AI on that?
I mean, I think it's it's hotter than Web3. I'll say that these days, at least. Yeah, look, I mean, we just invested in this company, Jasper, in the generative AI space. It's facilitating some of these kinds of AI writing and AI marketing agency types of approaches. I mean, it is truly remarkable. The growth is there for a reason. Again, at Insight, we don't sit back and just try to be so super theoretical about where we want to invest. We really just try to get a pulse on the market directly to form investment decisions. And Jasper is definitely one where you could just you could hear the demand, the suck of the vacuum of just there's a huge market for this. And so I think what Ron was talking about, in terms of the application of generative AI to DevOps and to new application development, it's pretty mind blowing. How you secure that? That's just a whole other
That's going
topic.
to create a whole new industry, no doubt. Simon, what about you with AI? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I do think that it is very early days, but you are starting to see some startups that I think are trying to pull in AI to enable kind of a better collaboration experience between DevOps and developers. I think mostly, one I've seen is a company called Kubia, which is basically providing a better way to, in natural language, just request services or request kind of provisioning of resources. And I think it is kind of it's a nice kind of opportunity, especially in that kind of enablement. I think you're also probably seeing it in kind of optimization of workloads and so forth. And I think that probably is has kind of more of an ML need versus maybe like a full generative AI kind of capacity. But yeah, it is starting to get kind of inserted into kind of these nice little problem areas across kind of the DevOps and SDLC process. So, but still early days.
Absolutely. I want to jump into DevOps and things IoT, but before we do, one more question from the audience, and that is, Mac, what trends will you recommend for new DevOps startups to focus on going forward, especially to provide better and more attractive value for customers? Thomas, I don't want to go to the well again, but I'm going to ask you to kick it off.
Look, I mean, again, you just have to cater to the developer, which is a very fickle user buyer persona. And, I see a lot of companies with very exciting technology with a ton of potential, but, commercializing it and the change management required, or even just getting a developer to pay attention to you, let alone pay you, is quite challenging. I think the new vendors tend to underestimate that challenge. So sort of what I'm seeing in the market.
Fair.
I would tell people to focus on controlling cost. If you're designing an offering and 95, if not 99% of what you're using is somebody else's resources or code, you have to think about managing that. And we've had a couple companies sort of recompile and refactor to use the Amazon chipset, for example, and they've dramatically reduced their CPU usage cost. And that was literally one of those things. We're going to spend 2 quarters doing this, and then we're going to save money forever, at these rates beyond. And that's the kind of conversation people who are doing managing DevOps need to think about with their businesses. How can they save money and be more efficient?
Great. All right. Let's move on to what I used to call IoT, right? And to me, IoT used to be SCADA devices. They were simple devices on, off. But today, when we talk about the DevOps of things, whether it's pacemakers implanted in your chest, the chips in your Tesla or other cars, every car has literally hundreds of chips now. Still the critical infrastructure controls, But it's sensors in space, sensors at the top of mountains, sensors at the bottom of the sea. There's going to be 55 billion devices connected to the internet, including your refrigerator. And they all run software now. They have more headroom. You put more software on them. DevOps has a role in developing that software, and security is probably going to be tested once again. DevOps of things. Julian, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to kick this one off.
That's a big one. So obviously, OT is certainly for corporate enterprises has become front and center because of what you're saying. Even many new devices, not just legacy devices, that are OT oriented, control more and more things. Recently I was involved in an opportunity where we're selling to a water municipality, and they wouldn't allow their air conditioning. In this case, I shouldn't say air conditioning, their cooling equipment to touch the internet, because if you change the temperature of the water before it goes through the full process, you can make somebody sick or you can kill them just by changing the temperature. And so there was a lot of adversity and consternation about putting them on. And after working with them with a lot of solutions that didn't have anything to do with Rapid7, actually, they finally got to the point where they were a lot more comfortable with it. But the big issue is in this case, I won't say the company, but they're the largest refrigeration company in the world. In collaboration with them, it's amazing to see how they're trying to change their development processes to get their customers, specifically these industrial customers, much more comfortable with having this equipment internet facing. It's a big problem, and it's only going to get worse. And companies like Tenable and Rapid7 are responding to it in kind.
Fair. Panel?
I mean, there's a hair on fire moment just in terms of the inventory of what do I have that's attached to my network from a device perspective, and what is the risk associated with that device. It could be an IT device, it could be an OT device. And so, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Armis. I mean, they are the clear leader in this space for device and asset security. And, the hair on fire moment is what do I have? But there's the deeper question of what are the behavioral elements that indicate there's an issue. And certainly geopolitical factors and tensions and the jumping of cyber risk into the physical realm with, utilities being affected and impact on actual, human populations, it becomes a pretty profound issue and source of demand as well.
Yeah. I mean, just as kind of a concept, I am so excited about the idea. Just to take another view of this, I'm really excited about kind of the opportunity of, DevOps across the edge. One, I think there's huge kind of opportunity to actually standardize the software development process to match more of the traditional application experience, and I think that's a huge opportunity. And then two, I think from a security innovation side, maybe not security experience and management side, it also represents a huge kind of opportunity to tackle a new problem. And I think companies like Armis are kind of helping with certainly with the hygiene side of things, but then understanding kind of the network segmentation that you might need to do in this world, being able to do vulnerability discovery, looking at kind of the firmware, security here, I think is a lot of really interesting, companies can be, formed just to start tackling some of these issues. So on that side of things, as an investor, I see it as good fertile ground for investing. So
yeah, a number of comments here. I think it's really good to bring up OT at a DevOps conversation, because there's a lot of analogies. Like, you can imagine if I'm in the hardware widget making business, I've got a bunch of APIs in the cloud, and just some of those APIs also run on that endpoint, so it's all part of a synchronized DevOps point of view. Said another way, you probably take code and you strip it down to run in a container. It's a very similar process. We don't ship full Linux operating systems, for these OT devices. We have to kind of strip it down and do that. So it's very, very similar processes that go on and whatnot. I think a lot of the new OT devices have better security, but a lot of them come from China, a lot of them come from overseas, and they might not have as much robust standards as we think we do. Where do they host the data? What's the quality of that going on? But there's still a huge problem with old OT devices that are on-prem. How do you find them? They might have fragile TCP/IP stacks. They might not respond well to vulnerability scanning and asset discovery, and they might not even make any really network traffic for you to go find it. So it's a really, really hard issue. But I think the future is definitely more optimistic than the past. If you consider an OT device like an iPhone or an iPad, those things are really, really hardened compared to like a Windows Surface. Even like a Google Android phone is a much more locked down system. So a future, if that's your primary computing device, even though that's kind of an OT thing, it's actually probably going to be more secure than a traditional modern complex operating system.
So what scares me though is I don't see standards, right? Look, software is software, application is applications. Today, connected devices have much more headroom than SCADA switches or something. So I guess the same way we develop software for a phone is the same way we could develop software for your toaster or your pacemaker, right? I don't see standards around security evolving there. I don't see standards around, we talk about software supply chain and stuff like this. And that's what kind of can keep me up at night.
So you got a good point there, Alan. Not only are there not standards, but there's some great social issues that we haven't really answered yet. Julian talks about he likes getting his updates to his Tesla. But what if I have a Tesla and I want to make my own updates? If you have a BMW, for example, and you want to just change the battery, you have to take it into a dealer and get them to recalibrate that for you. So what is mine? What is a service? Who can do those things? If we can't even answer that, how can we answer what's secure and where this data goes in the first place?
Julian, sounds like you.
Well, I think you have to look at the whole ecosystem, right? Again, this is a journey and an evolution. The way I see OT devices going, well, there's two sides to this. The one side is just operationally looking at it from a security perspective, like you look at any other device on the network. That you're looking for vulnerabilities and you're looking for behaviors that are non-characteristic. But the flip side is from a standards perspective. There are a couple of fledgling, ICS is starting to pick up some steam. But the real issue is until we start to look at it as an ecosystem, it's still going to be a place for, I think, great opportunity, to Suman's point, for lots of startups to really come in and try and provide some synergy here. The lack of standardization is and lack of efficiency is what leads to more opportunity for companies to provide value here.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think that something to maybe kind of look out for is, in the IoT, OT world, there really isn't kind of an open source ecosystem. And I think we do look to open source, especially in DevOps and dev tools, to kind of be that origin point for new standards. And so I think, maybe there will be kind of an open source approach to kind of helping kind of iterate on what those standards could be that can be adopted more broadly to kind of get to some convergence across the DevOps process, but also kind of some of the cyber practices needed as well.
I agree. Hey guys, we started early and we're coming right up on time here. I need to wrap it up. Suman, Julian, Thomas, Ron, it's so great to be able to call on people like you when we have a panel like this, a subject like this. You add and bring so much to it. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And to our audience, we have a full day of great. I'm hearing an echo. I apologize. We have a full great day of great content. I think I am due back out at around 12:30. We're going to have a live Zoom with the audience for question and answers on anything DevOps, and I'll be a part of that. Hope to see you then. But for now, that's it. Thank you, panelists. Enjoy the rest of DevOps experience, everyone.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Jerry Campanero, who's General Manager for Risk Qualification for Threat Connect, and we're talking about cyber security insurance, which a couple of years ago, everybody would have said, well, who needs to talk about that? And now it's all the rage these days because a lot of folks bought insurance instead of upgrading their security. And now the insurance companies figured out they might have been taken for a ride and they're starting to push back. So Jerry's going to walk us through how to navigate all of this. Jerry, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Michael. Thanks. You said that well, too. It was a good opening.
So explain to us how we got where we are at the moment. And then what is currently happening, because it does seem like the insurance guys are getting a lot smarter, but maybe it's not in the best interest of everybody the way we're going about it right now anyway.
That's a great question. Cyber insurance is kind of the wild, wild west for insurance, right? Insurance has been around for a long time. Nobody talks about insurance in the wild, wild west. But cyber insurance is relatively new. They've only been writing it for, this millennium almost, for the most part. That's when it started becoming popular. And the challenge really came about because cyber attacks started increasing massively, and then all of a sudden people started going, well, hang on a second, my data got lost. I'm going to sue the company that had my data. And the companies went, I got sued. I need insurance. How do we work this out? And they'd go to their insurance company and say, I need cyber insurance. And the insurance companies were like, yes, what exactly is that? And they would kind of figure out and work together, and typical conversations would be like, well, you need cyber insurance. Yes. How much cyber insurance do I need? And the insurance companies would say, how much money do you have to spend? And they'd set their premiums, they set their policies based on simple conversations. And then what happened was the bad guys got smarter, the bad guys got more accurate, and the losses started growing. And so we found ourselves in a time of maturing cyber insurance, which started as very, very simple to now it's very, very hard to get good insurance at the right level with the right kind of coverage on it. And it's just all a matter of kind of the changing market, right? It's continuing to change as well too. A few years ago, you could get cyber insurance relatively easily. Now there's a lot more qualifications to this because the insurance companies are paying out more. The claims are getting bigger, and they're doing what good stewards of their money would do. They're going, hang on a second, should I underwrite this risk or not? And if so, how do I minimize my risk as an underwriter to this? So this is kind of just an evolution we're seeing played out in relative fast forwardness. It's not like, land insurance or health insurance or car insurance that plays out over a long period of time. It's just playing out very, very quickly. I'll say that.
I think the magic $1 million word you said there was levels. So am I supposed to now figure out what to insure at different levels of risk? And that's how I should go about that, because I can't just blanket insure the entire company and every piece of data. So do we have to think this through a little more aggressively?
I think that's actually spot on. And that's the challenge right now. The companies have to think it through much more carefully. And they've got to think about, they have to start. This is a little bit of a bigger challenge. Remember, insurance is a risk transfer mechanism, right? You buy insurance to transfer risk, right? You have car insurance because if your car gets hit, you don't want to have to buy a brand new car. You use insurance to transfer risk. The challenge companies have is that they got to take one step back and go, what's my risk in the first place? And so they're trying to figure out, to answer your question, they're trying to figure out, well, how much data do we have and how much risk does it generally bring to us? And what does that look like? So they can figure out how to slot insurance to help from a mitigation, and it's not a mitigation, but from a transfer perspective. And so they are going, well, do I need this much insurance or this much insurance? What can I afford versus what does my overall risk look like? And then they got to take that other piece of the puzzle, which is, all right, but how do I, the way I talk about it, cyber insurance is like life insurance, right? It's something everybody should have, but nobody really wants to use, and you don't get to use it more than once often. So you want to make sure you got it set up appropriately so that you don't need it, but you're investing in the right kind of defenses so that you can lower the chances of needing it. So that triangle, if you will, of having risk you accept, having risk you transfer, and having risk you mitigate is the struggle companies are beginning to realize they have to get to, because the cost of everything have just exponentially increased so much over the last few years.
Are the insurance companies assessing your security risk much more deeply than they might have in the past, and they're actually hiring people to go do that before they write the policy?
They're starting to, yes. We've seen some of the policies that, send a big long questionnaire, 50-page questionnaires that talk about, what do you have? Do you have the right security in place? And that's a good start. The challenge with that, though, is the bad guys don't exactly go, oh, you know what, you fill up the form. You've got all the defenses in place. We're good. I'm not going to attack you now. They waited. They'll come back the next day. They'll come back a month later. They come back three months later. They're very patient and persistent. And the way that people are assessing cyber insurance today is not, I call it the way it needs to be. It's a very static, my renewal's coming up, let me look at my insurance type at this period in time. Let me look at my security posture at a point in time. And your risk landscape, your technical landscape changes so fast, so radically that it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Do you think that if we look at healthcare, we saw insurance companies push the rise of HMOs, do you think we'll see cybersecurity insurance companies starting to dictate a more aggressive response in terms of how we handle, say, a ransomware attack and how we manage that whole liability? Will they become more engaged than they are today and maybe even take over some of the direct response?
I actually think they're moving in the opposite direction. They're acting and reacting, but what they're doing is they're saying, we're not going to cover this anymore. What they're saying is, don't pay the ransom. What they're saying is, if you have this kind of attack, they're excluding more from their policies, right? Because remember, insurance is part of one of three things you have to do with cyber risk. You have to figure out as a company how much you're going to accept, what you're going to transfer, and then how do you mitigate? How do you invest in your own environment to make sure your defenses, you don't need the insurance. I'll say it that way. So what the insurance companies are saying basically is, we're going to not cover these things. They're actually shrinking or putting a larger ring fence, if you will, around the policies that they have. They're increasing the exclusions because the payouts are increasing. So what they're doing is they're actually changing the game. And in a way, that's a good thing. We had a conversation with one of our customers, and one of the things that he stunned me when he said this, I said, how do you want to kind of think about cyber insurance in this conversation? We're helping them, put dollar value, cyber risk, and figure out this stuff. He goes, actually, we don't talk about that. We have a policy, but it's like a company secret what the policy was. I was like, what do you mean a company secret? He goes, well, look, if that number gets out, what happens is, and the bad guys find this, they'll come after us and they'll basically ransom us for the number that is what the insurance company will pay out. Like, that's a number people now go hunting for, kind of like your social security number was years ago, or kind of like your driver's license. Like that, they're treating that number around your cyber insurance policy like we've treated different kinds of data pieces in the past. So I don't know if I see it as an HMO. I see the insurance companies trying to go, I don't want to cover that. How do I get out of that? And they're passing the onus really back to the companies to manage that risk on their own now.
Do you think that maybe there's some sort of virtuous cycle going on here? Because in order to qualify for insurance, I have to have better security than I had before. So people are investing more in security just to get insurance. And maybe this is not such a bad thing when all things are considered.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, this might be one of those tangential benefits of increasing decreasing cost that actually is good for everybody. I think one of the things, the way we look at this is what the insurance companies are doing is actually going to be good for the industry in general, because it's going to force companies to think about what do they really need, and are they spending their money in the right places. At the end of the day, and they're going to start talking about cyber as a business risk. Look, the silver lining all this, if you will, is that CISOs talk about cyber risk with their boards now, right? 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the number of CISOs who talked about cyber risk to the board more than just a passing, do we have security yet? Okay, good. Thank you very much for that. Was minimal. So we are, and this is a positive change, right? Unfortunately, positive change tends to come through challenging environments. Let's just say that.
What's your best advice to folks then, how to navigate all this? Because I think some folks look at it and they go, my God, this is complex, so they don't do it. But so do I need to hire, my own cyber insurance broker now to help me navigate all this stuff?
I definitely think you got to work with the broker, but I think the other thing they have to do is they have to. My advice is always that cyber insurance is one of the three things you need to do. Right? You couldn't sell me car insurance if I didn't know how much my car is worth. Right? You drive a car, it's worth $20,000. I don't need $50,000 worth of car insurance, and I kind of don't want $1,000 worth of car insurance either. I kind of want $20,000 worth of car insurance, and I'll choose my deductible based on what I can afford. What we need to see, my advice to people is actually to think about cyber insurance that way and go, what am I at risk for? Well, you're a big e-commerce company. If you lose your site for a week, that's going to cost you this much. Okay, great. We now know how much that's worth. What can we absorb as a company? Do we have enough people to handle orders manually? I don't know, maybe. Okay, great. So what that process that I'm walking them through, my advice is really understand what your risk is, because otherwise you end up buying the wrong either level of insurance or you buy the wrong kind of insurance. First of all. So first is people really have to put $1 on their cyber risk to even be in the right ballpark for having this kind of conversation. And then they've got to start working with their broker to go, all right, look, here's what I want to do. I want to have this much insurance for these kinds of attacks. And here's what I'm willing to pay for this. So they can work out that piece. But then the companies themselves have to go back to, all right, but how am I going to invest internally in security to make sure that maybe I don't need to call on my cyber insurance broker over the year? They have to close that triangle. If they don't close any of the three parts of that triangle, it's like getting car insurance for $1,000 on a $20,000 car, not wearing a seatbelt, speeding like crazy, and not having a steering wheel in your car. Like, you're just doomed. Like you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. Former U.S. president said the 9 most dangerous words in the English language are "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." So, what will be the role of the government in this whole thing? Because we do see them taking an active role in other insurance segments.
Yeah, I love that. I love that statement. That was a good one. So here's where history, though, is in my opinion, an indicator of actually how the government can help. So if you go back 100 years, people started driving cars about 100 years ago, give or take, right? And the accident rate and the death rate per capita was a lot higher 50, 75 years ago than it is today. What happened about 50 or 75 years ago is the National Transportation and Safety Board started going, hey, hang on a second. They were set up to help reduce the automobile accidents and death that we had. So we ended up with things like seatbelts. We ended up anti-lock brakes. I mean, all the great safety mechanisms that have been adopted are because you actually had industry working with government to drive standards in a way that everybody could agree to. That kind of concept is actually, in my opinion, how the government can help, right? We need a cyber security safety board that acts like the NTSB, because the challenge is, if I'm a company and I buy cyber insurance, I'm focused on myself. I want to know I'm good. And the cyber insurance company is going to know, is my risk, for the pool of companies that I have, high or low? And that's what they're really focused on. But nobody's saying, well, what happens if my third-party vendor gets hit? And then what happens if their third-party vendor gets hit? And the ecosystem of security is so broad that you actually need somebody looking over that going, hang on a second, we need to put some general standards in place so that everybody transacting with data, for example, is always encrypted and it's always two-factor authentication, full stop. And that's just going to be written into law as an example. You can't transact business, you can't send data over the internet unless you do that, as an example. Only a government can do something like that. So we need somebody to kind of look at the landscape across the board for security and say and act like the NTSB, because I think if they could do that, which started light, it was an interactive process between the industry, the automotive industry, and the government. Like, it wasn't just the government helping, like your quote said, but they actually listened and learned. I think if we had something like that, you'd start to see the reduction in risk. You might even see the premiums go down and companies lose less money. So I'm definitely a fan of let the industry figure these things out. But unfortunately, the industry is not set up to look. No one is set up to look so broad across such a wide spectrum of the problem, in my opinion.
All right. Well, going with your metaphor, do we need somebody to show up and write a book that's titled IT Unsafe at Any Speed? And then that forces everybody down the path? Or how far are we going with this?
I like that. I like that. That's a great book idea. Hope none of your listeners steal that before I get a chance to write that. No, I'm kidding. I think you're going to see it happen. I think you're going to see it happen. The White House has been talking for years about increasing security. I think the other thing you're seeing regulations start to come down the pipe. Like there's a couple this year. One, the SEC, Security Exchange Commission, is coming out and starting to say you're going to have to report. Public companies are going to have to report on their material cyber risks. Like you're seeing that happen now, right? It's happening. It's just kind of bubbling up from the bottom. You're seeing cyber insurance costs increase. You're seeing companies start to go, hey, I don't know how this works. You're seeing the SEC start to go, what's going on here? I think we're going to get there. I think we're going to get to the point where, putting your seatbelt on in the car is the first thing you do. Is the same thing as enabling two-factor authentication for your environment. Making sure that your car has a, roll cage or whatever that. I'm not a car guy. My ignorance is coming out here. You have a front bumper that can absorb some of the impact of your car. It's the same thing as having a good firewall. That kind of stuff. Yes, I can start to see that analogy playing out but it's the momentum for that's already started. How much the government gets involved or not, that depends on how fast or slow we want it to go.
Of course, we've been talking about this from the perspective of corporate insurance, but we've seen some CISOs wind up in court, and I'm wondering, do security people need their own personal liability? Will members of the board of directors have to expand their liability to include cybersecurity decisions? How's that going to play out?
Yes, actually, the short answer, that's definitely. I mean, D&O, directors and officers insurance, was what people thought would cover cyber breaches years ago, and it's like, no, hang on a second. We'll definitely have to. That was a wake up call to the security industry when that CISO got indicted for that. That was pretty wild. But yeah, I do see the point where, again, this is all going to boil down to kind of how the money flows. If we see the lawsuits coming at these companies for losing that kind of data, then yeah, the directors and officers with fiduciary responsibility for their companies will be liable for this, and it's not covered today in their current insurance. The challenge for a CISO though is harder because CISOs get budget. They don't make budget, right? For most companies, they're not going, hey, I'm going to take this much money and I'm going to do everything I've always dreamed of doing in security, and therefore, if something bad happens, it's on me. It's typically like security people say, hey, I want to do 10 things, and they get budget for 4 or 5 or 6. It's never enough to secure everything because the only way to secure everything is actually to shut everything off. And I don't really want to walk around with stolen tablets anymore. I kind of like my phone. So I think the balance for a CISO and the challenge for the CISO is they have to be able to have that conversation with the board. They go, hey, look, we're funded for this much. We've got this insurance. We're working on these things. There's still a risk to us of X dollars from a cyber perspective. Let's make sure we got good insurance for all of us, and let's make sure we're doing the right thing. Part of the challenge is doing the right thing, right? Showing that fiduciary responsibility to the company itself is how a CISO and their board can actually mitigate some of the risks and some of their exposures as well too. And so I think we're starting to see that change. That was a wild one that happened a couple of months ago.
All right. Last question on the heading of hopeful thinking. If we spend so much money on security and insurance and costs continue to rise, do you think we'll ever get to the point where maybe we'll all agree to collaborate more to solve the fundamental problem in the first place?
I think collaboration will happen. I think part of the challenge is malicious actors will always act maliciously. And that's the unfortunate nature of the way it works. I think we will see more collaboration. What I would love to see is collaboration across a supply chain, so that vendor 1 and vendor 2 and vendor 3 and vendor 4 talk to each other, reduce that risk. I do see that happening because, look, unless you're a security company, you don't want to spend money on security if you don't have to, because it's not core to your business. So I think we will see that drive to figure out how can we mitigate or reduce the cost of these things. And again, not your 9 famous words. I love that quote. But somebody bigger is going to eventually have to step in and help with that. Here's an interesting thing for you as well too. An analogy is, I forget one of the insurance companies, car insurance companies, basically said, hey, look, if you put a little device in your car and you let us monitor your driving, will potentially lower your premiums, as a simple example, right? I'm going on record here saying I would never do that. Not that I'm a speeder. Don't hunt me down, but I occasionally, roll through a stop sign or two. I would never do that. That just drives me nuts. But imagine if a company just did that internally and said, look, we're going to monitor our cyber risk on a regular basis, continuously, not just as one a year assessments we do. You could get enough data, enough telemetry, both at the company level and then start to roll that up, that you'd have the data needed to help influence the decisions that you're kind of describing where we're going as well too. So I do see that coming, because of the costs are just they're not going to go down. They're not going to go down. They're not going to go down.
All right, folks. Well, I'm going to end this on another quote. If we don't all hang together, we will surely hang separately. Jerry, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I love it.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Yulia Guntar, who is Strategic Growth Executive for Super Protocol, and we're talking about decentralized confidential clouds and what that means and where we might see them. Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everybody.
I guess the only place to get started here is at the beginning. So what exactly do we mean by decentralized confidential cloud computing, and how does it work, and what does it look like?
If I may, I would start a bit further. I would start with in general, why we're talking about decentralization and cloud confidential computing. So, back in 1993, Stephen Levy, now the famous and popular technical writer and journalist, wrote an article in Wired describing that the information, like the whole life of people, of a person, has becoming more of information, money, opinions, contacts, everything. So now we're living in the world of service-centric world. It means that your history, your Google search history is stored actually in Google. Your money is at Citibank. The music that you are enjoying is at Spotify. Your movies are at Netflix. KYC is at fintech. So it means that you are not actually possessing your own data, right? It is actually stored and controlled by traditional cloud providers. And very soon we will be moving to a world where the user will actually possess the data. It means that we will be moving to user-centric world. And that's where you will be really owning your money, your reputation, your social interests, your social graphs, these kind of things, and you will be the one who will grant an access or revoke an access to your certificates, to anything that you want to be interacting with the world. Even it means that even if you are working and or trying to use some public services, this is also you who will be owning your trusted and verifiable personal data. And to make it happening, the technology is already existing. But to make it really working and realizable and executable, this is where the decentralization comes in. And this is where decentralized confidential computing should be in place. Because when we talk about decentralization, and we're talking about personal data, the most sensitive data, you need to have it really secured. And trusted execution environment, this is some kind of a general purpose confidential computing technology that allows to protect your data, your confidential, sensitive, whatever data you want to protect, right, and keep for yourself and control it. So it's like you are protecting it, and this technology helps to protect it, even if the owner of a hardware has a physical access to the hardware itself. So this is the only reason how this kind of user-centric world would become real life. That's when it's really stored confidentially. That's why we're talking about decentralization and confidential computing.
We hear a lot about Web3 and blockchain. Is this kind of a confidential computing layer that sits on top of that? Or what's the relationship between confidential computing and those emerging technologies?
So blockchain is about a public blockchain. This is about decentralization. But what we see in public blockchain is that all the transactions are actually transparent. So actually, it's you cannot rewrite them, but everybody can see it. So to make it confidential, you need to have an extra layer of confidential computing. And there are different confidential computing technologies that are already available on the market, but you really have the opportunity to run any kind of workloads, so really do work as if it's like a normal, your way of doing and working with the data, for example. You need to have really general purpose confidential computing. That's why you need trusted execution environment. And as of today, we're seeing the projects in public blockchain that are looking for confidential computing, for example. But for the moment, we don't see any ones that have already implemented. And that's what we're doing at Super Protocol, exactly. We're combining the best out of public blockchain technology and trusted execution environment in order to provide this decentralized confidential computing to the community. And we are planning to make it open source. So that would also mean that the much more, sustainability, security will be also in place in comparison with closed and centralized systems outside of even the public blockchain, but in general.
So what exactly does Super Protocol do? I mean, did you guys build a protocol for this or a layer of software? Or are you providing a service? What's your role in this?
So Super Protocol, we can call ourselves as ISV, so software vendor. So we're developing the protocol itself, which will be serverless. It means that we will not own our own infrastructure, which will be 100% layer of confidential computing in place. So this is really the foundation confidential computing, right? And we will be working with the whole community to provide this kind of infrastructural layer of confidentiality and all the kind of transactions between users and the platform. The protocol itself will be done on blockchain level. This is something that we're developing. The first phase of testnet has been launched. We're preparing to launch the second one, and we're seeing a lot of interest from the community, from Web3 initially community, because this is something that we see is like confidentiality and ability to work, to drive any kind of project in a truly decentralized world. It's something that is really in much demand.
Is it your hope to eventually work with some sort of consortium on this because it's an open source project? So do you think as we go along, we'll see a lot of companies contributing to this?
Well, we do assume that having the open source, it will have a lot of community and contributors in that, and we are always open to participate in different projects and consortiums in general. From our side, what we're doing is that outside of developing the protocol itself, we understand that in order to, one thing is to understand that the confidentiality is needed, and the other thing is to understand what kind of use cases could be really implemented on that. So we are here trying to help the whole community. So we're already integrating with various also open source companies, which are, some kind of, which could leverage our infrastructure of confidential computing, right? And bring the expertise and the use cases that they have already proven on the market. And that's where we do believe we would show the community how they could start leveraging these kind of technologies. And further on, because it's like open source, if they believe there is other way to go, they would be able to do so. But usually this is the community that supports the project itself, see a value in that and contribute to make it much more better for everybody.
There's always tension between privacy and various police agencies around the world. So they like to be able to track payments through various types of digital currencies because it helps them track down ransomware and other various criminals. How do we strike a balance between the need for the ability to investigate and privacy?
So you see, when we talk about confidentiality and confidential computing, it's not about hiding something in general. It's about ensuring that the data is not revealed, it's not compromised, right? But because it is like the blockchain and because there are mathematical algorithms in place, it's just it's still, you can match it, but you cannot, nobody will be able to see what you are matching, right? But you still be able to see the results of it if you wish. So it means that when the confidential computing is not the technology in order to hide something, right? And because of that, a lot of government, healthcare, for example, companies and government healthcare agencies are utilizing already confidential computing. Because like if we talk about, for example, not just police, we're talking about medical records, for example. This is really very sensitive. And if we talk about further on, if we'll talk about even metaverse, right? The future of the merge of virtual and real world, right? So this is kind of things that may possess the even national security questions, right? So you really need to stick and ensure that personal information is kept privately, right? And it is securely placed in that. And it doesn't mean that how to say it. It doesn't mean that you are really trying to hide something in a sense.
How long will it take to realize this vision, do you think? I mean, will it become a ubiquitous service, or will it just be something that I kind of have as an option from a cloud service provider? How do you think it will be consumed?
I think there are more than 3 to 5 billion people using internet, right? And in the sense, understanding that we've got the habits of the data leak, right? The data breaches, etc. But we also need to understand that when such a significant amount of data is stored in centralized and closed clouds, one or the other day, everyone may become, if that's like not the luck, may become the victim of compromising their own data. That's why we're talking about the whole world of really demanding, in reality, the protection of their personal data and being there, have the opportunity to own this data. And because of this, so many people, users who are companies who, because they also, liable for, because of various regulations, right? And because of their customers' reputations, they really need to protect the personal data. Right. And because of this high demand, this is something that should be, as we expect, be demanded on the whole market. So it would not be some kind of a niche. It will really become the global ambitious project in life.
Do you think ultimately this will supplant the Web 2.0 type companies that are centralized today, or will it kind of exist alongside it and we'll have kind of centralized and decentralized services?
Well, I would assume that there would be some kind of step-by-step process, right? Because, for example, now already certain things, certain services need to be done in decentralized mode, and that's why, for example, governments of various countries in Europe, in US, are already working on decentralized project based on self-sovereign identity, right? And because this is some kind of things that really need to make sure that the users possess their own data, right? And simplify the process of working with public services, with working with different organizations and making it much more effective and quicker. These are the things that maybe come much quicker to some extent. On the other side, there are certain, of course, services where the enterprises may stick to some public cloud, but the fact itself that the user's data will not be physically stored in these centralized and closed clouds will significantly unleash the maybe the threat of data breaches and will help the companies to work in this kind of world. But further on, as time passes, the more Web3 world and the ecosystem itself will be evolving, the more opportunities will be opened. And why it is important is because when you are in a closed and centralized ecosystem, you actually need to rely on the technologies that have been already deployed, used, and accepted by this system itself, right? But if you want to really take the opportunity as any small or large enterprise, if you want to take the opportunity of the new technologies that could really, make a difference, you should not rely whether this large organization accepts to implement the technology and give you the access to it or not. But with open source, right, things, you can actually take the advantage as soon as it is available. And that's why we do believe that it will be a significant impact on both the users and the business world.
Do you think people understand what it is that we're asking of them? I think a lot of people are just conditioned that, we're going to live in a world dominated by the Facebooks and Microsofts and Googles of the world. Do we need to educate people about what's the issue here and how do we go about doing that?
Well, definitely, there is a lot of things to be done here. Because one thing is habit, and people may use to something, and it really takes time to demonstrate that there are other possibilities and the advantages of those, right? So definitely we need to do that, and I would assume that even this interview, right, is something to demonstrate that these technologies are already coming in. Yes, but at the same time, I do believe that the more data breaches, like what I'm doing even today before a meeting with you, I just Googled if there is any new data breaches, right? So, and actually even almost every day you may find some news on that, right? So today it's Japan, actually, the first news I saw in the insurance space. So it means that the more people will really become victim of that story and will really physically feel that it's not something that's acceptable for them. This is something that may really also push them to look for alternatives. And because this is already evolving, the more people will be looking on that. And we also see on the Web3 world, this from the business side, these are already in demand, right? So once we are unleashing it, we definitely believe that it will be a success for that.
All right. Yulia, where do I find out about this project? Where can people go to check it out?
So initially, you can just type superprotocol.com. So you will go to our website, which has a very simplified video, just explaining the whole sense in 2 minutes. Why we're developing this decentralized confidential super cloud, and it actually has, because we're thinking about open source community, right? We have already developed a very significant white paper talking about what are our targets, audiences, what are our goals, how we plan to implement it, and we are revealing this kind of information step by step in order to ensure that the communities are aware of that.
All right, Yulia, thanks for being on the show and sharing those insights, folks. You heard it here. You got to go figure out how to take control of your own data destiny.
Thank you very much, Mike.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews with industry professionals to give you the latest in the tech world. And alongside our episode of the CD Pipeline, we had plenty of great content today. We'll be back again on Monday, so we hope to see you then. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.